Chapter 567. His blade seems to have completely evolved? Tang San muttered. His blade didn't have this kind of power in Hell's Path. Now that it's become a sword, its power has increased exponentially. As expected, his spiritual power has probably reached an unimaginable level. Douluo found it hard to defend against the two flying swords. On the other side, the white-clothed Popetiff didn't move at all. After a while, Douluo couldn't hold on anymore. This was because the flying swords weren't affected by Douluo's 8th soul skill and weren't restricted in any way. They were fast and powerful. When everyone saw this scene, especially the imperial family, they were completely stunned. It was too strange. The white-clothed Popetiff was clearly under control, but Douluo couldn't hold on anymore. It was as if he was only one step away from victory, but couldn't take the final step. In less than 5 minutes, Douluo's jade-scaled snake emperor couldn't hold on anymore. Finally, it fell to the ground and reverted to its original form. At this moment, the petrified layer on the white-clothed Popetiff's body fell off. He was still standing in his original spot. Everyone was silent. That peerless demeanor was deeply imprinted in everyone's mind. What else do you have to say? Wang Feng looked at the imperial family. The members of the imperial family were deathly pale. They didn't expect the situation to be like this. Now, can you abide by my etiquette? The two flying swords combined and returned to Wang Feng's side. They floated quietly in the air and emitted a cold aura. Qian Renxue didn't say anything. She didn't care who won. Whether it was the Heaven Do Empire or the Martial Soul Hall, she didn't care who would win. But she was now Xueqinghe. She could only look at the white-clothed Popetiff unwillingly. She snorted coldly and reluctantly took the lead in kneeling. The others had nothing to say. Tang San sighed in his heart. The white-clothed death god had become the Popetiff of the Martial Soul Hall. With his strength, it seemed like he would become their enemy in the future. At this moment, Hulaina and the others were incomparably excited when they saw the imperial family kneeling. Although the Snowy Night Emperor wasn't here, it was clear that these people were here to pick a fight. Now that they were subdued by Popetiff, their prestige increased. But this was within Hulaina's expectations. With Wang Wu's strength, how could Douluo be a match for him? But Lord Popetiff's way of doing things was exceptionally inspiring. They couldn't help but admire him. Wang Feng could feel all sorts of emotions as he watched them kneel. He was using his power to oppress them. Douluo had been defeated, but it was impossible to make these people submit to him. The ideology of the empire was already deeply ingrained in their bones. To be able to do this was already not easy. The various emotions caused Wang Feng's blood mark to strengthen slightly, which was somewhat strange. Bishop Salas pondered. Pondering, he suddenly said, "It's already late. It's already late. Could Your Holiness the Pope rest for a day in the Holy Temple? Let this subordinate do the honors of a host." It was almost evening. Wang Feng nodded slightly and followed Bishop Salas into the Martial Spirit Temple. Xueqinghe and the others watched the white-robed Popetiff leave in silence. "Prince Xuexing, I apologize for not being able to help you." Douluo had already finished recuperating. He let out a long sigh. "This white-robed Popetiff is unfathomable. I wonder how the Martial Spirit Temple managed to recruit someone like him." He wasn't seriously injured just now. The white-robed Popetiff only wanted to defeat him, not injure him. Prince Xuexing's face was a little pale. He waved his hand and hurriedly said, "It's already not easy for Mr. Douluo to come and help the imperial family." Douluo was a titled Dalu. He wouldn't blame him for losing. "Tangyin, this white-robed Popetiff is really strong. I just saw my sister and the others being suppressed by him." Princess Xueku stuck out her tongue and whispered among the imperial family members behind her. Tang San nodded slightly. "This white-robed Popetiff's name will definitely shake the continent after this patrol. He'll be able to stir up a storm on the continent alone." Tang San left with a belly full of thoughts. Today's meeting had given him a huge shock. He had to plan for the future. He was still too weak. He didn't even have a chance against a sole Douluo, let alone a titled Dalu. There was no hope for revenge. Nighttime. In a luxurious room in the martial spirit temple, Wang Feng stood outside the window and looked at the night sky. The moonlight was cool and refreshing. Qianrenxue has changed a lot. It seems like Little Three is indeed in Heaven Do City. It seems like he has some connections with the imperial family. But I'll see you again in half a year. Wang Fengxin thought about what happened today. Although he only met Douluo as the white-robed Popediff, it gave Wang Feng a different feeling. The old poison had also changed a lot. But compared to the strength of the martial spirit temple, it was really not enough. Speaking of which, when did Bibi Dong's god inheritance begin? Is it going to be another 2 years? Wang Fengxin's heart skipped a beat. At this moment there was a knock on the door. Come in, Wang Feng said lightly. The door opened. It was Hu Laiina. Why are you looking for me? Wang Feng didn't look back. He was still looking at the moonlight outside. At the door, Hu Laiina looked at the window from afar. The white-robed figure bathed in the moonlight seemed to be covered by a layer of silver gauze, making him look otherworldly. Hu Laiina's heart skipped a beat. She lowered her head slightly and walked in. Teacher has a secret letter for you. He also said that the Hall of Elders is very satisfied with your performance. With that, Hu Laiina took out a letter from her arms, walked behind Wang Feng, and handed it to him. Wang Feng turned around and looked at Hu Laiina, who had her head lowered. He took the letter and nodded. I see. Wang Feng took the letter and read it. This letter should be sent urgently. Given the distance between Heaven Do City and Martial Spirit City, it would take an ordinary soul master 20 days to travel. The content of the letter was very simple. It just mentioned the recent events. It also told Wang Feng to keep up the good work and that there was an important task for him when he came back. Although Wang Feng had left the Pope's palace, he must have kept in touch. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a red-robed bishop following him. The Douluo world didn't have a powerful way of transmitting information, but there were some special ways to send messages. It was probably sent 2 days ago. However, it was enough to prove that what he had done in the past month had earned the trust of the Martial Spirit Palace. After what happened in the Elephant Armor sect yesterday and today's events were spread, Bibidon would probably be even more satisfied. End of chapter. Chapter 568. Is there anything else? After reading the letter, Wang Feng found that Hu Laiina didn't leave. He couldn't help but ask, is there anything else? Hu Laiina seemed to be thinking about something else. She was awakened by Wang Feng's voice. Her body trembled like a frightened rabbit. Immediately, her face was dyed with a little blush. No, no, no. After saying that, Hu Laiina sighed softly and said in a slightly deeper tone, Master Popediff will go to the 7 treasure glazed tile sect tomorrow. Sword Douluo and Bone Douluo are both honorary elders of my martial spirit palace. You should just go through the motions. However, you still have to be careful. There was a little concern in her tone. Thank you for your concern, Wang Feng said calmly. If there's nothing else, I'm going to rest. Oh, okay. Hu Laiina turned around and seemed to have something to say. She walked very slowly. When she reached the door, she suddenly turned around and said, Wang Wu, will you stay in the Martial Spirit Palace forever? The sudden question stunned Wang Feng. He subconsciously thought that his identity was exposed. But looking at Hu Laiina's bright eyes, Wang Fengxin was relieved. But he also fell silent. Why do you ask? Wang Feng didn't answer but asked back. I don't know. I just have a feeling that you will leave the Martial Spirit Palace. Hu Laiina shook her head and said in a low voice, but I really hope that you can stay in the Martial Spirit Palace forever. For more than a month, I feel like I'm dreaming when I saw you come to the Martial Spirit Palace. Wang Fengxin was slightly shocked. F***ck, These girls' premonitions are very accurate. At that time, Zhu Zhuqing and Ning Rongrong inexplicably had a premonition and guessed his identity. This Hu Laina was also the same. Now she actually had a premonition that he would leave the martial spirit palace. Although she didn't guess his identity, it was already exaggerated enough. However, Wang Feng didn't hesitate and directly answered, "Since I've joined the martial spirit palace, I won't think about leaving." "You don't have to ask this question. Wang Wu won't leave, but I, Wang Feng, will leave." "Sorry, please forgive me for deceiving you," Wang Fengxin thought to himself. In fact, he could have said something ambiguous, but that was not in line with his character. Moreover, who knew if this was Bibidan's secret instruction to test him? Hearing this, Hulaina immediately smiled like a flower as she looked at Wang Feng. She made a sound of acknowledgement and a faint charm involuntarily appeared in her beautiful eyes. Soon after, she gently closed the door and slowly left. The next day, Wang Feng and Bishop Salas briefly discussed the internal situation of the Martial Spirit Temple before setting off on their journey. There were actually quite a lot of experts in the Martial Spirit Temple. Other than him, the Platinum Bishop, there were 3 other red-robed bishops who were in charge. Originally, Sakas wanted to go to the 7-treasure glazed tile sect with him, but Wang Feng rejected him. Every time Wang Feng patrolled a city's martial spirit hall, he would have a detailed understanding of the strength of the hall. He would also check the records of the number of soul masters who came to be certified. This was his job for this trip. Every time he patrolled a place, Wang Feng felt that the martial spirit hall was really powerful. In the martial spirit temple of the Heaven Do Empire, including the temple knights, there were close to 3 digits of soul masters above rank 50 and below rank 70. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that there were hundreds or thousands of soul masters below rank 50 and above rank 30, and they all believed in the martial spirit hall. On the surface, the strength of the martial spirit hall already showed how powerful it was. One had to know that this was a soul master. Even the imperial family of the Heaven Do Empire might not be able to form a temple knights with this number of soul masters. Bibidan had been running the martial spirit hall for so many years, who knew how much power she was hiding? Wang Fengxin felt a little heavy. But soon, he brought the 3 of them to the 7-treasure glazed tile sect. It was worth mentioning that Hu Laina and the other 2 had all advanced by a level midway. It was obvious that these days they had been by his side, cultivating while watching and learning, and their cultivation speed had soared. This caused the 3 of them to worship and admire the white-robed Popedif even more. The 7-treasure glazed tile sect. This place didn't seem like the Elephant Armor sect, which was located in a city. Instead, it was like an otherworldly sect. Many pavilions stood on the mountainside of a small mountain, and a city could be seen in the distance. But the 7-treasure glazed tile sect wasn't located in a city. It was built according to the terrain, just like the Heaven Do Academy, on the home ground of the 7-treasure glazed tile sect. "Father, who is that white-robed Popedif? There has been a lot of talk about him recently." Ning Rongrong was wearing a pink gauze dress with a snow-white shirt inside. Her hair was neatly combed, and she exuded a unique aura. Faint light flickered, and she gave off a noble and elegant feeling. Beside her stood Ning Fengji and 2 other titled Doulu. Behind Ning Fengji, there were many elite disciples of the sect. "I don't know who he is, but yesterday, Elder Dugubo from your school was defeated by him." Ning Fengji lowered his voice and said, "Furthermore, he was defeated very quickly and powerlessly." Ning Rongrong was stunned. Dugubo had become much stronger over the past 4.5 years, and he was no longer the weakest titled Douluo. But now, he was defeated so easily. "I heard that this white-robed Popedif can control his sword to attack. Even if he's petrified, he won't be obstructed. He's very powerful. If your Uncle Jian was at that level, it would be difficult for him to control his sword to attack." Gu Rong shook her head and said, Furthermore, he hasn't revealed any other abilities. I'm afraid he's not inferior to your grandpa Jian. The sword Douluo had just reached rank 97, and he was already one of the top titled Douluo in the entire continent. To be able to compare to him, Ning Rongrong was stunned. Is it that exaggerated? Ning Rongrong pursed her lips and said softly, I don't believe you. If Wang Feng was here, I would believe you if you said he's not inferior to Grandpa Jian. Gu Rong, Chen Xian. Ning Fengji sighed in his heart when he saw this. He felt a little helpless. When he left the Pope's palace, he lied to Ning Rongrong and everyone from the Shrek Academy that Wang Feng would appear in 5 years. He wanted to let these 5 years dilute his feelings for his daughter, but not only did they not dilute, but they even deepened because of his longing for her day and night. What a sin! Especially a few days ago, when she obtained those 2 wooden carvings from God knows where. Now she was overjoyed every day, just waiting for the promised time in a few months. She even murmured that Wang Feng would come to see her in advance. The closer they got to that time, the more worried Ning Fengji became. This was because he knew that Wang Feng would never appear. At this moment, a streak of sword light flashed across the sword Douluo's eyes. He's here. His spiritual power was extremely sensitive to swords. Long after the sword Douluo finished speaking, the others saw a streak of black light streak across the sky and land on the square of the 7 treasure glazed tile sect. At this point, Ning Fengji and the others finally saw the white-robed Pope Diff. Why is he wearing a mask again? Ning Rongrong frowned slightly when she saw the white-robed Pope Diff. She didn't say anything, but she thought to herself, pretending to be mysterious. Is the martial spirit hall learning from Wang Feng? He's wearing a mask. Ning Rongrong's expression changed slightly when she saw the golden figure behind the white-robed Pope Diff. She clenched her fists when she saw Yan. Yan's appearance meant that the Pope no longer cared about what happened in the Pope's palace. Ning Fengji and the 2 titled Douluo didn't change their expressions much. They seemed to have guessed it. Several pairs of eyes fell on Wang Feng. The sect leader of the 7 treasure glazed tile sect, Ning Fengji, greets the white-robed Pope Diff. Ning Fengji walked over, crossed his arms, bowed slightly, and said calmly. With his status and strength, he wasn't inferior to the Snowy Night Emperor. Naturally, he didn't need to bow. Ning Fengji was qualified not to bow even when he saw the Pope. However, the white-robed Pope Diff waved his hand and said, Sect leader Ning, my purpose here is very simple. I'm not here to visit but to ask for advice. I'm here to visit the 7 treasure glazed tile sect to ask for advice. At this point, the white-robed Pope Diff said slowly, I'm here to ask for advice from the 2 titled Douluo in your sect. As soon as he said this, the people of the 7 treasure glazed tile sect fell silent. Even Hu Laina and the other 2 behind them were stunned. P.S. There are 4 more chapters before 12 o'clock. End of chapter. Chapter 569. Ask for advice? This seemed like a very humble phrase, but it was extremely frivolous and arrogant here. This was because the 2 titled Douluo of the 7 treasure glazed tile sect were both famous titled Douluo on the continent. Their strength and status were so high that there were very few titled Douluo in the Martial Spirit Hall who could compare to them. What shocked Hu Laina even more was that Lord Popediff's original plan did not have this intention. Originally, he only wanted to take a look at the 7 treasure glazed tile sect and go through the motions. At most, the 7 treasure glazed tile sect would cause some trouble and make things difficult for Popediff, but he would not do anything rash. Unexpectedly, Lord Popediff took the initiative to attack. At this moment, even Hu Laina and the others looked at each other. They felt that Lord Popediff was really a little strange. He did not take the usual path and did not play by the rules. He was really arrogant and wild. He came straight to the point. Bishop Thomas, who was behind them, also wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. As an attendant sent by the Pope, He was usually responsible for reporting the specific situation. However, Lord Popediff was really strong. He came straight to the point. His style was fierce, as expected of Popediff, whom the Pope made an exception to appoint. Bishop Thomas, who had been in the martial spirit hall for decades, felt that he had walked with fear and trepidation all the way. Ha ha ha! Ning Fengji was stunned at first, but then he laughed. Ask for advice. Since Lord Popediff has such plans, the 7 treasure glazed tile sect will not dampen your spirits. After saying this, Ning Fengji turned to the sword Douluo and bone Dalu. Uncle Jian, Uncle Bone, what do you think? The sword Douluo and bone Dalu were silent for a moment. They looked at each other and nodded slowly. If it was an ordinary titled Douluo who came to ask for advice, they would not even bother with him. However, the other party was white-clothed Popediff. He had great influence and they could not reject him. At the same time, the two of them were a little displeased. This Pope clearly didn't care about the two of them, who were titled Douluo. Seeing this, Wang Fengxian smiled. Wang Fengxian couldn't help but sigh with emotion at the sight of the sword Douluo and bone Dalu. Setting aside the sword Douluo, Tang Wulin had last sparred with him in the Great Star Do Forest, and the bone Dalu had been evaded by him. He never thought that he would be able to exchange blows with the two of them now. When Wang Feng arrived, he naturally wasn't planning to leave right away. It would be best if he could spar with the sword Douluo and bone Dalu. This was especially true for the sword Douluo, as it was also a type of enhancement for him. Who wants to go first? Wang Feng said slowly, don't go too far. This is just a spar, nothing else. After he finished speaking, the sword Douluo took a step forward and said proudly, I'm here to witness the strength of His Holiness Popediff. He took a step forward and his aura surged. His snow-white robe fluttered without wind. On the square, the two sides were less than 100 meters apart from each other. Father, this Popediff seems to be even more arrogant than Grandpa Jian. Ning Rongrong's face was red. If not for the fact that she had become much more mature over the past 4.5 years, she would have opened her mouth directly. He has the strength. From what I heard, this is his character. This white-clothed Popediff might be the most powerful person in the history of the Martial Soul Hall. Ning Fengji said softly. Humph. Ning Rongrong snorted coldly. Grandpa Jian will beat the crap out of him later. Although she said that, Ning Rongrong still stared at the square. On the square, Wang Feng didn't look at Ning Rongrong. Because he was wearing a mask, he could only use his spiritual power to sense her. Subconsciously, he didn't want to sense Ning Rongrong's existence. At this moment, Wang Feng was fully immersed in the battle. In fact, Grandpa Jian had yet to reach rank 96. He was at the pinnacle of rank 96, and was still a little away from rank 97. If Grandpa Jian was like the golden alligator Douluo, who was at the pinnacle of rank 97 and was about to reach rank 98, Wang Feng wouldn't want to spar with him. There was a huge difference between every rank of a titled Douluo. Towards the end, every rank of a titled Douluo would increase greatly, apart from soul power and soul skills. It could be said that the sword Douluo was much stronger than the sword Douluo that Wang Feng had met in the Great Star Do Forest a few years ago. Most importantly, the sword Douluo used a sword. Wang Feng wanted to see some of his ultimate moves and see if he could learn something. With his current physique and intelligence, it wouldn't be difficult for him to learn anything. However, it would be a little troublesome to force the sword Douluo to use them. At this moment, a light breeze blew. The sword Douluo's 9 soul rings suddenly shone. 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 5 black soul rings. It was the most standard soul ring configuration. A bright silver sword that was 4 feet long and 3 inches wide slowly appeared beside the sword Dalu. When this sword appeared, a special killing intent was suddenly released. It instantly enveloped the square. This killing intent was different from the killing intent in the City of Massacre. It was an extremely pure killing intent. Martial Soul, 7 kills sword. Wang Fengxin was stunned. The sword Douluo didn't intend to go easy on him. After all, he was the white-clothed Popediff now, and he had come to challenge him. If he lost, he would lose face. Wang Feng didn't hold back either. He directly activated the power of his 6 blood patterns and entered a special battle state. The Xianming flying sword also stood quietly beside him. He directly released his original sin's domain. The surrounding space seemed to enter a state of darkness. Talent domain? The sword Douluo could clearly feel that the white-clothed Popediff's strength had suddenly increased. Although he didn't reveal his martial soul and soul rings, it was obviously a form of concealment. However, the sword Douluo didn't care. He naturally had a domain too. Furthermore, it was extremely powerful. 7 kills domain. The sword Douluo snorted coldly. The 7 kills sword suddenly released an intense light. Under the cover of the light, the sword's aura was hidden. It instantly clashed with Wang Feng's original sin's domain. It even overpowered it. The advantage of his strength allowed his 7 kills domain to completely overpower Wang Feng's original sin's domain. However, it didn't overpower him by much. It was more like a confrontation. Seeing this, the sword Douluo was slightly shocked. The white-clothed Popediff didn't seem to be very strong. With his current aura, he was at most a rank 95 titled Dalu. However, his opponent's domain wasn't weaker than his own. One had to know that his 7 kills domain was extremely difficult to cultivate. In the next moment, the sword Douluo had already attacked. Although he had a tool martial soul, his body was extremely strong. Furthermore, he didn't use a method similar to Wang Feng's sword kinesis technique. Instead, he held the 7 kills sword in his hand. Fast, extremely fast. As he attacked Wang Feng, the soul rings on his body lit up one after another. Evidently, he was releasing a soul skill. Furthermore, it was an amplification-type soul skill. The offensive strength of the 7 kills sword could be said to be one of the best in the entire continent. Almost all of Elder Jian's soul rings had an extremely strong amplification effect. At the same time, streaks of sword chi formed and circulated around the sword Douluo's body. Fortunately, Wang Feng's current spiritual power was far greater than before. He was able to somewhat capture the sword Douluo's speed. End of chapter. Chapter 570. The sword Douluo wielded his sword, and the strength he could unleash was much stronger than Wang Feng's sword-wielding ability. As the sword approached, Wang Feng's mind stirred as the flying sword blocked in front of him. It was a very ordinary sword attack, and there was nothing fancy about it. However, its strength was beyond Wang Feng's imagination. Wang Feng felt a jolt in his mind. The sharp blades that formed the flying sword were instantly destroyed. If not for the fact that Wang Feng's spiritual power had already condensed into water droplets, the sharp blades would have turned into mysterious underworld spikes. He would have been exposed then. Wang Fengxin was shocked. Elder Jian didn't even use his martial soul true body, but he was able to destroy the flying sword. He even managed to disperse the spiritual power that he had attached to the flying sword. This attack was ridiculously strong. Wang Feng retreated after this attack, and the sharp blades turned back into flying swords. At this moment, the sword Douluo's speed wasn't inferior to Wang Feng's. Sword aura entered my body? Wang Feng, who was retreating, felt a special force suddenly enter his body from the outside. It was the effect of the sword just now. It should be a special soul skill. This sword aura destroyed Wang Feng's body. It contained streaks of terrifying 7 killings sword intent, and was difficult to control. He could only use his soul power to resist this sword aura. Bam! At this moment, the sword Douluo thrust his sword forward again. The immense sword aura stirred up space, and all the energy in the entire arena seemed to be concentrated on this sword. The flying sword blocked in front of Wang Feng again. However, it was destroyed even faster this time. Wang Feng retreated once again, but another streak of even sharper sword aura entered his body. Is this the 7 Killings sword intent? Wang Fengxin thought to himself. These 2 streaks of sword aura were wreaking havoc in Wang Feng's body. Even with Wang Feng's body, he could clearly feel waves of pain, but he couldn't do anything about it. Although it looks like an ordinary attack, with every attack, the opponent will be eroded by the 7 Killings sword chi. It won't take long for the opponent to be defeated. Wang Fengxin thought to himself, Elder Jian probably hasn't used much of his true body. Many titled Douluo won't be able to resist such a simple attack. Clang! Clang! After several more attacks, more 7 kills sword chi appeared in Wang Feng's body. This sword chi contained a unique concept, and its destructive power was extremely strong. After 7 attacks, the sword Douluo suddenly stopped. You've been hit by 7 of my 7 kills sword chis, and you're still able to hold on. The sword Douluo narrowed his eyes slightly as he looked at the white-robed Popediff. His aura isn't chaotic either. This was his 4th soul skill, 7 Annihilation Sword Chi. Sword Chi circled around his body, and every strike contained extremely terrifying sword Chi. Even if his opponent could block his sword moves, the sword Chi would still enter his body. After the 7 streaks of sword Chi, titled Douluo who were weaker than him would instantly be knocked unconscious by the impact of the 7 streaks of sword Chi. In more serious cases, their internal organs and foundations would be damaged. His 7-kill sword was extremely aggressive. As long as he attacked, it would be an extremely fierce attack. Wang Feng, on the other hand, was feeling the uniqueness of the 7 sword chis within his body. Other titled Douluo might not be able to control these 7 streaks of sword chi. But who was he? He was Wang Feng, and he had immense spiritual power. His dustless glass body was very strong, and his intelligence and comprehension were very high. How could he be the same as those titled Douluo? Wang Feng was trying to understand the sword intent contained within these 7 streaks of sword chi. This was also the reason why Wang Feng had asked the sword Douluo for advice, to secretly learn something. After all, he was also a swordsman. Right now, Wang Feng felt like he had understood something. Old Master Jian had practiced swordsmanship for so many years. Every strike of his seemed ordinary, but it was naturally not simple. At this moment, the sword Douluo moved again. This time, his 5th soul ring lit up. A terrifying sword light was brewing on the sword Douluo's 7 kills sword. A rainbow-like sword chi gathered crazily on the 7 murders sword. Wang Feng could vaguely feel the sword chi in his body being pulled by something. He could not help but be startled. Soul skill, 7 ultimate soul extinguishment. The sword Douluo swung his sword towards Wang Feng. This sword wasn't fast, but it seemed to have locked onto Wang Feng. No matter how strong Wang Feng's spiritual power was, he couldn't avoid it. It's sword chi locking onto me. The 7 streaks of sword chi in my body have the ability to attract this move. Wang Feng instantly understood. It was as if a tracker had been installed on his body. These 7 streaks of sword chi were like a tracker. No matter how he dodged, he couldn't avoid this move. Fatal lock. The terrifying sword light flashed across the entire plaza. Everyone's vision was blocked. They were completely covered by the light that was released from this move. What's going on? Huliana's heart tightened. The sword Douluo was indeed strong. He was able to suppress Wang Wu from the start. Just like the golden alligator Douluo. Ning Fengji was also watching. After this move, the white-cloved Popediff would definitely be defeated. Even if he wasn't defeated, he would be severely injured. Among them, the Bone Douluo understood this the best. The 7 ultimate soul extinguishment and the 7 kills sword chi were 2 extremely powerful killing moves. They couldn't be defended against. Furthermore, after the 7 ultimate soul extinguishment struck the opponent, it would form a connection with the 7 streaks of sword chi in the opponent's body. it would become even more powerful. It would severely injure the opponent. Even a titled Douluo of the same level would find it difficult to withstand it. And this was only the fourth and fifth soul skills. Right at this moment, a scarlet light suddenly flickered from afar. It was a soul ring. Boom! An enormous aura appeared along with this scarlet light, and the situation instantly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. In the next moment, everyone's eyes widened. It was a huge cauldron. A red soul ring surrounded this huge cauldron. At the same time, two black soul rings slowly lit up. The huge cauldron was upside down. However, the white-clothed Popetiff was nowhere to be seen, but right after that, the huge cauldron slowly rose, revealing the white-clothed Popetiff's figure. Seeing this, the sword Douluo was stunned. Martial soul? Cauldron-type martial soul? Could it be that he used this huge cauldron to block my sword move? The sword Douluo frowned slightly. Cauldron-type martial souls weren't rare on the continent. However, most of the cauldron-type martial souls focused on defense. Evidently, this white-clothed Popetiff's huge cauldron was the same. It suddenly appeared just now and blocked his move. 100,000-year soul ring, so that's it. The sword Douluo's pupils contracted slightly. He looked at the red soul ring with a hint of shock in his eyes. Everyone from the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile sect was even more shocked. Popetiff, 100,000-year soul ring, no wonder, Ning Fengji muttered. Every soul master knew what 100,000-year soul ring meant. At this moment, Wang Feng coughed a few times, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. However, he wasn't seriously injured. It was just that a few streaks of sword qi wreaked havoc. End of this chapter. Chapter 571. Wang Feng naturally couldn't have used his physical body to receive the attack. If he had, he would have been severely injured. In addition, he couldn't have dodged it. In a moment of desperation, he used the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth as a defense to block the attack. Although the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth wasn't like the Black Lotus, it was enough for an individual. It also had this ability, but it would drain a lot of his soul power. The cauldron slowly landed in Wang Feng's palm and released a blinding light. The sword Douluo stared at it for a while before attacking Wang Feng again. Isn't it just sword qi? I can do it too. However, Wang Feng revealed a smile on his face this time. That's right. Wang Feng had already comprehended the profundity of Old Master Jian's sword qi entering his body. Of course, it didn't mean that he had learned Old Master Jian's soul skill. Wang Feng didn't use his divine light of heaven and earth. With Old Master Jian's speed, his divine light of heaven and earth could be dodged even if he didn't use his 7 kills sword true body. Instead, he would expose his soul skill. Soul skills naturally had to be used at crucial moment. It was the best. This time, Wang Feng didn't use his sword to defend. Instead, he held his sword in his hand. The Xianming flying sword felt different when he held it in his hand. However, one used his spiritual power to drive it. The other used his physical strength and soul power to drive it. At this moment, Wang Feng's soul power was like that of the Xianming flying sword. Countless sharp blades formed a flying sword without any gaps. It was like a real sword. He also charged towards the sword Dalu. Sword light flashed everywhere. The two figures intertwined in the middle of the square, as if two dragons were fighting. Sword qi swept across the entire plaza, causing terrifying explosions from time to time. It made one's scalp numb. Their attacks were so fast that it was difficult for anyone who wasn't a titled Douluo to see their attack frequency. Only the Bone Douluo could see it clearly. Ning Fengji could also see it more clearly. The difference was that Wang Feng's sword light was red. On the other hand, the sword Douluo's sword light was pure silver. The more they fought, the more injuries Wang Feng suffered. These injuries were all caused by Old Master Jian's sword qi. Wang Feng planned to use the ice reflection skill when Grandpa Jian attacked him with his 7 murders sword. However, the sword Douluo seemed to be extremely experienced, and he didn't use his 7 kills sword to attack any part of Wang Feng's body. Every sword move was made with sword qi, causing Wang Feng quite a bit of injury. Wang Feng was shocked. Clearly, this old Jian had been tricked before. When Wang Feng's cauldron of heaven and earth appeared, he became even more careful. Clang! Another collision, and the Netharism flying sword in Wang Feng's hand was directly shattered. It couldn't be helped, the sword Douluo's attack power was too strong. Even though Wang Feng used his spiritual energy and soul power to form the Netharism flying sword, he was still unable to block the sword Douluo's 7 murders sword. Unfortunately, I don't have a sword. Wang Fengxin thought it was a pity. Although the dark nether spike could be combined, it wasn't real. After Wang Feng was blasted away, many tears appeared on his white robe. However, the sword Douluo was completely unscathed. From the looks of it, the sword Douluo had the upper hand. In fact, the sword Douluo was extremely shocked at this moment. This was because he realized that there were several streaks of sword qi in his body. Furthermore, these streaks of sword qi carried a bloody glow and each contained a different sword intent. Not only could they corrode his body, but they could also affect his spiritual energy. What kind of sword qi is this? The sword Douluo couldn't help but be extremely shocked. Could it be that this white-clothed Popetiff also learned my 7 murders sword qi? But this sword qi is completely different. Every streak of sword qi contains a unique sword intent. Even I will be affected by it. Furthermore, he has taken so many of my moves. The sword qi in his body should have exploded and he should have died. But now there are actually no changes. It's just his hand. Strange. In fact, this sword qi was condensed by Wang Feng using the power of the 6 blood patterns. The 7 blood patterns that had been cultivated from the dark angel martial soul represented 7 different types of origin emotions. Wang Feng had comprehended them from the sword Douluo's sword aura, and he had poured the power of the blood patterns into the mysterious underworld flying sword to form a special sword aura to kill his enemies. The effect was obviously very good. As for the sword qi in his body? Sorry, Wang Feng directly absorbed it into the 7th blood pattern. This sword qi contained an extremely strong killing intent, which happened to be absorbed by the 7th blood pattern. The 7th blood pattern seemed to have undergone some special changes and awakened after absorbing the killing god's domain. Now, it just happened to absorb the sword Douluo's sword qi and killing intent. At this point, the two sides clashed for the second time. The sword Douluo's gaze became deeper as he looked at the white-clothed Popetiff. This person didn't give him a strong feeling from their first clash, but he was extremely resilient. The combination of the 4 and 5 soul skills didn't cause any damage to him. In the second clash, this person didn't use his flying sword and actually fought him head-on. Although he suffered many injuries, they were all minor injuries and had almost healed by now. This showed that the other party's physique was extremely strong. Other than that, he even imitated his 7 murders sword qi. Every time they clashed, sword qi would enter his body. Furthermore, it was completely different from his 7 murders sword qi. It was an even more terrifying sword qi. They contained different kinds of power. This white-clothed Popetiff is very strong, but his soul power is depleting very quickly in this state. His cauldron hasn't used any soul skills yet. It's very strange. I have to be very careful. The sword Douluo snorted softly. As he used his soul power to neutralize the sword qi in his body, he planned to use his true abilities. Wang Feng was also waiting. If the sword Douluo dared to use his martial soul true body, his divine light would be a piece of cake. When the time came, he might not be able to defeat the sword Douluo, but they could definitely fight to a draw. Right now, the sword Douluo was much weaker than the golden alligator Dalu. If he didn't use his martial soul true body, it would be very difficult for him to unleash his 8th and 9th soul skills. He might as well not use them at all. Normally, titled Douluo's 8th and 9th soul skills required their martial soul true body as a prerequisite to unleash their full power. The divine light of heaven and earth was the bane of this type of titled Douluo. Under normal circumstances, the divine light of heaven and earth didn't have a high hit rate, but it was almost impossible for the martial soul true body to dodge. This was because most martial soul true bodies were too big. As expected, the 7 murders sword in the sword Douluo's hand suddenly enlarged. It became a super treasure sword that was dozens of meters long. Wang Feng remembered that when Tang Hao used his clear sky true body in the pontiff's palace, it transformed into a 100-meter-long hammer. It was extremely terrifying. However, that was because Tang Hao also had a 100,000-year soul ring. When he used a soul skill, his clear sky true body became so huge. The sword Douluo didn't have a 100,000-year soul ring, but this sword was already very powerful. 7 murders sword true body. Father, he forced Grandpa Jian to use his 7 murders sword true body. Ning Rongrong was astonished. Didn't Grandpa Jian have the upper hand? Ning Fengji also frowned. He was a little confused. End of chapter. Chapter 572. This white-clothed popetiff is too resilient. Old Sword's sword moves aren't very effective against him. This is very strange. I might as well use my martial soul true body to defeat him. I won't give him any chance to retaliate. The Bone Douluo was very puzzled. He would be at a disadvantage if he dared to fight Old Sword in close combat. His 7 kills sword chi couldn't be broken. No matter how strong his defense was, he would slowly lose his fighting strength. However, the white-clothed popetiff became more and more courageous. He didn't seem tired at all. Furthermore, the Bone Douluo could tell that Old Sword was at a disadvantage. A terrifying aura was unleashed from the huge sword. Logically speaking, Wang Feng felt that his cauldron of heaven and earth would be destroyed. This was because his soul power couldn't support the cauldron of heaven and earth to resist such an attack. The cauldron of heaven and earth was only a martial soul. Wang Feng used his soul power to materialize the cauldron of heaven and earth. Its defensive strength was linked to his. It didn't have an invincible defensive strength like the Black Lotus. I haven't reached rank 60 yet. I can't take this attack, Wang Feng thought to himself. If he was above rank 60 and had his 6th soul ring, Wang Feng would be able to take it. However, he couldn't do it now. Therefore, divine light of heaven and earth. Wang Feng had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The 7-colored divine light from the cauldron shot towards the huge sword in the distance. Under the rainbow-colored divine light, the super big sword that was dozens of meters long shrank rapidly. The sword Douluo was a little stunned. He only felt that the strength of the 7 kills sword was quickly draining away. He was very shocked. What's going on? Is this the soul skill of his cauldron of heaven and earth? The divine light of heaven and earth was so strong that any soul master who was hit by it would be shocked. After a short while, the 7 kills sword true body turned into a small copper sword. It was only 3 feet long. The sword Douluo, Ning Fengji, the Bone Douluo, it was too difficult to react to such a change. Furthermore, Wang Feng's timing was very clever. It was right when the 7 kills sword true body was formed. Wang Feng knew that the 8th and 9th soul skills of a titled Douluo were extremely powerful killing moves, let alone the sword Douluo, who was very strong. If the sword Douluo were to unleash this attack, Wang Feng would have no chance of victory in his current state unless he used his other major forms or the Panguak. However, the sword Douluo reacted extremely quickly. He gripped onto his spear, and his aura abruptly swelled drastically. From this, it could be seen that the sword Douluo was more powerful than the titled Douluo of the martial soul hall. Those like the chrysanthemum Douluo were completely rooted to the spot. At this moment, the sword Douluo quickly reacted, and his aura didn't falter at all. 7 killing swordsmanship. The sword Douluo's eyes turned cold. His opponent's 100,000-year soul skill was far more powerful than he had imagined. It was actually able to revert his 7 kills sword back to its original form and even lower its quality. It was no wonder that the martial soul palace would use such a heaven-defying soul skill. However, it would not be so easy to defeat him. Although the quality of his 7 kills sword had decreased, he was still able to use his soul skills. He also had the 7 kills swordplay that he had honed over the years. The two of them clashed once again. The sword Douluo's 7 murders swordplay was contained within the 7 murders sword. However, he had to comprehend it himself. Simply put, there was a special sword intent within the 7 murders sword. Through this sword intent, he could comprehend the 7 murders swordplay. However, it was a pity that the quality of the 7 murders sword had decreased, and the strength of the 7 murders swordplay had decreased significantly. However, it was enough. The sword Douluo was very focused. In the next second, he attacked Wang Feng. The small copper sword in his hand shone brightly. Sword floating duckweed. The small edgeless sword seemed to be very suitable for this move at this moment. Several rays of light formed a terrifying sword array and blasted towards Wang Feng. Wang Fengxin was shocked. His soul skill was gone, but he still had a sword technique? Old Master Jian, are you trying to change the dynasty and develop in the direction of a fantasy world? Although he was only complaining in his heart, Wang Feng didn't underestimate this move. He used his mysterious underworld flying sword to unleash multiple streaks of sword light to counter this move. Boom! There was a huge explosion. Wang Feng easily countered this move, as the sword Douluo's 7 murders sword had weakened. 7 emotions soul extinguishing. The sword Douluo closed his eyes and waved the sword in his hand 7 times. He seemed to have used the first move to unleash this move. 7 streaks of sword light in 1 second. They seemed to contain different sword intents as they attacked Wang Feng. This move, Wang Fengxin was slightly stunned. These 7 streaks of light were even faster than the first move. Wang Feng seemed to have understood something. He raised his mysterious underworld sword and closed his eyes. The power of his blood pattern circulated throughout his body, and different emotions appeared in his mind. Wang Feng also waved his sword 6 times. 6 streaks of blood-red light of different forms struck the 6 streaks of light from the sword Douluo's sword. Wang Feng took the last streak of light head-on. A bloody wound appeared on Wang Feng's body, but his mind was shaken. He felt a special emotion spreading from his mind. It's 7 different emotions. The first move of the 7 emotions soul extinguishing seems to contain different emotions. The last move is actually able to affect my mind and stir my mind. Once I'm hit by it, I'll definitely fall into this kind of emotion. It's similar to the power of my blood mark. Wang Fengxin smiled. Unfortunately, the blood pattern of his dark angel martial soul was the nemesis of this emotion. Moreover, the emotion contained in this move was not as strong as the original emotion of the blood pattern. Directly absorb. Also, 7 emotions soul extinguishing square root. Wang Feng felt that he could do it too. Sword breaks Southern Mountain. There seemed to be a special story behind these 3 moves. The last move was indeed a single move. Only half of the sword light was left. It seemed to have condensed. With 1 strike, it seemed to be able to split the mountain and the earth. It directly struck towards Wang Feng. The quality of the 7 kills sword has decreased, but it can still unleash such power? Wang Feng was shocked. Is old Jian's combat strength so strong? Spirit seal. An icy mystic light blasted towards the sword light. However, this sword light was more than 10 meters long. It was too long and too big. Even if it was frozen into black ice, when it fell, it still smashed onto Wang Feng's body and slightly injured Wang Feng. It landed with a loud bang, and a 10-meter-long ravine was formed in the square. Clouds of dust flew all over the sky, Wang Feng's face was slightly pale. Old Jian is really strong. He can actually force me to this extent. Fortunately, old Jian's 7 kills sword chi, 7 kills swordplay, and sword intent were slightly restrained by his blood pattern. Otherwise, Wang Feng felt that he would have been defeated long ago. At this moment, the sword Douluo was silent. He just stared at Wang Feng. The 7 kills swordplay was extremely powerful, and naturally, it consumed a lot of energy. Wang Feng coughed and said calmly, "Let's call it a draw." Although he said that, Wang Fengxin smiled. He had gained a lot from this battle. 7 kills sword chi square root, 7 kills sword intent square root, 7 kills swordplay square root. This battle allowed Wang Feng to comprehend many things. However, everyone was silent. No one seemed to have recovered from the shock. The sword Douluo snorted and nodded without saying a word. Seeing this, the crowd was in an uproar. P.S. Everyone, rest early after watching this. Don't stay up late. Hey, end of this chapter. Chapter 573. A draw? It was obvious that the sword Douluo couldn't possibly lose. Why did the sword Douluo agree to a draw? Even titled Douluo of the same level couldn't fight the sword Douluo to a draw. Furthermore, the sword Douluo's 7 kills sword had already recovered. The cosmic divine light couldn't last for long. After all, the difference in their soul powers was too great. As long as the sword Douluo continued to attack, the white-clothed Popediff wouldn't be able to hold on. Ning Fengji and the others couldn't understand. However, the sword Douluo must have his reasons for agreeing to a draw. Wang Feng understood that the sword Douluo had used the 7 kills sword technique after its quality had been lowered. There must be some side effects. If they continued to fight, the sword Douluo might not be able to defeat him. Of course, he probably couldn't do anything to the sword Douluo either. This was why the sword Douluo agreed to a draw. If they continued to fight, both parties would suffer different degrees of internal injuries. They were easily angered. However, Wang Feng had taken a shortcut. If the sword Douluo had used the 7 kills sword technique right from the start, I would have lost even if I could last 3 moves. Wang Fengxin thought to himself. However, the sword Douluo wouldn't have used this technique right from the start. After all, he still had a bunch of soul skills that he hadn't used yet. He wouldn't use such a trump card against his opponent. Of course, if Wang Feng knew that the sword Douluo had the 7 kills sword technique, he would have been very careful. I've expended a lot of energy. The bone Douluo will be more troublesome next. Wang Feng took a deep breath. However, I can try out the 7 kills sword technique that I've comprehended. I can train a little. The bone Douluo focused on defense. He was the perfect target for practice. Alright, although this was a little despicable, Wang Feng wouldn't miss the opportunity. The sword Douluo walked down from the plaza. Grandpa Jian, why did you admit defeat? Ning Rongrong walked over and held the sword Douluo's arm. She asked softly, "Are you hurt?" She felt that the sword Douluo wasn't in a good mood, so she didn't ask in a displeased tone. The sword Douluo shook his head and looked at Ning Fengji and the others. He said, "If we continued to fight, I wouldn't be able to do anything to him." He seemed to be heavily injured, but they were all external injuries. The sword chi I left in his body had no effect at all. However, my 7 kill sword technique cannot be used easily. Once I use it, my mind will be shaken. If it were my 7 kill sword, there would be no such side effect. However, the 7 kill sword that I just used was of a lower quality. The second move of the 7 kills swordplay might not be the strongest in terms of power. However, it was the most difficult to deal with. Furthermore, this move was powered by 7 different emotions, which would also affect the user. If the sword Douluo had used his 7 kill sword, he wouldn't have been affected by this, but that wasn't the case. Therefore, at this moment, his mind was also shaken, and his combat strength was greatly reduced. So it's like that, Ning Fengji's expression darkened slightly, and he unleashed his 7 treasures glazed pagoda true body to quickly heal the sword Douluo. This white popetiff is quite strong. However, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that his comprehension ability is extremely frightening. Sword Douluo harumphed coldly. This man is very shrewd. It's definitely not a simple request for advice. It's very likely that he wants to learn a move or two from me. Hearing this, the 3 of them were shocked. Just now, the second move he used was similar to my 7 murders swordsmanship. Also, he managed to imitate my 7 murders sword chi to a certain degree. Furthermore, he even integrated his own understanding into it, forming a unique sword chi that is not inferior to my 7 murders sword chi. Sword Douluo said, "Old Bone, you have to be careful later." Bone Douluo was stunned. He frowned and said, "I don't believe it. How can this white popetiff be so strong in such a short period of time? He's exhausted a lot of energy now. Just watch, I'll get back at him for you." After saying that, Bone Douluo walked to the potholed arena. Although he's exhausted a lot of energy, he won't be defeated so easily. Sword Douluo thought for a moment. However, Old Bone has a point. At this moment, Hu Laina, who was behind Wang Feng, said, "Sect Master Ning, Senior Bone Douluo, can't we rest for a while before fighting?" Although Lord Popetiff and the sword Douluo were evenly matched, they had exhausted a lot of energy. He was much more exhausted than when he fought the 4-titled Douluo outside the Pontiff's palace. Bone Douluo walked to the arena and said, "Given his condition, he won't be able to recover in half a day. Do we have to wait for him for a day?" Gu Rong wasn't like Ning Fengji and the sword Douluo, who cared about rules. Naturally, he would take advantage of your weakness to take your life. Hu Laina was speechless. Wang Feng had exhausted 70 to 80% of his soul power and spiritual power in this battle. A normal titled Douluo wouldn't be able to recover in half a day. However, it didn't take long for Wang Feng. His soul power recovered faster than the sword Douluo, who was healed by Ning Fengji. It didn't even take half a day. If he used the energy stored in the Black Lotus, Wang Feng could even recover instantly. "You're right. There's no need." However, Wang Feng said calmly, "I don't think the 2 of you want to wait. I don't want to wait either. There's no need to rest. Come." Hu Laina sighed softly, her eyes filled with worry. "Sister, don't worry. Since Lord Popetiff did this, he has his reasons. We're always by his side. Don't you know how fast Lord Popetiff's soul power recovers?" Evil Moon patted Hu Laina's shoulder. "Lord Popetiff doesn't like to drag things out. He likes to end things quickly." "Of course I know that. Do I need you to tell me that? I've been by his side longer than the 2 of you. I know him better than the 2 of you." Hu Laina snorted. "But he's the Bone Douluo. He's even stronger than Elder Gui." Evil Moon laughed and pointed to the center of the arena. "Let's watch first." The Bone Douluo has already revealed his martial soul in the arena. Wang Feng was also watching attentively. In the original novel, the Bone Douluo rarely appeared, and he rarely made a move. At least in the storyline that Wang Feng had read. He had never seen the Bone Douluo make a move. His martial soul was bone, and it was more of a defense-type martial soul. However, it was also very offensive. It was just inferior to the sword Douluo. Wang Feng didn't know anything else. At this moment, he was naturally curious. 9 soul rings lit up one by one. Like the sword Douluo, they were the most standard soul ring configuration. However, his martial soul did make Wang Feng's eyes light up. The Bone Douluo's martial soul was a skeleton. Its entire body was pale gold, and it was divided into many segments. When combined, it looked like a huge golden skeleton. After being possessed by his martial soul, the Bone Douluo's bone-like body swelled rapidly. Even his old face began to change. He became younger and his hair began to grow out. His limbs were filled with strength, and his entire body was suffused with pale gold light. It looked like a special transformation. It was filled with strength and an indestructible feeling. End of chapter. Chapter 574. Wang Feng had seen skeleton-type martial souls before, but Wang Feng was truly astonished by the bone Douluo's transformation after being possessed by his martial soul. This time, the bone Douluo had learned his lesson from the sword Douluo, and didn't use his martial soul true body. He didn't use it either. No, there should be something special about him. Wang Fengxin thought to himself. Although the bone Douluo's defenses were very strong, it also meant that he had very strange attack. No matter what, I'll attack first, and practice the sword techniques that I've just learned. Wang Feng unleashed the power of his blood patterns. He didn't use the cauldron of heaven and earth. He held the flying sword formed from the mysterious underworld spike in his hand and charged towards the bone Douluo. Right now, the bone Douluo looked like he had cultivated the indestructible Vajra divine art. His entire body was pale gold, and even his skin was pale gold. Seeing Wang Feng charging towards him, the bone Douluo didn't panic. His first 3 soul rings lit up one after another. As these 3 soul rings lit up, the bone Douluo's body shone brightly with golden light. A golden light barrier suddenly appeared. At the same time, many bone spikes appeared on the bone Douluo's back. His hands were also filled with thorn-like spikes. The bone Douluo was waiting for his opponent to attack. Right now, his opponent was weak and he was strong. His opponent didn't have much soul power left. As the attacker, he had to expend more soul power. As the defender, he didn't need to expend much soul power. In addition, his defenses were very strong. It was impossible for his opponent to break through his defenses. The safest way was to stand where he was and let his opponent attack him. It was best to attack when he revealed an opening. This was also the easiest way to win. In fact, this was indeed the case. If he didn't attack, there wouldn't be any openings. Wang Feng wouldn't be able to find any opportunities. Wang Feng's remaining soul power couldn't outlast his opponent either. However, Wang Feng still attacked. Furthermore, the golden light barrier could block Wang Feng's spirit seal. It couldn't freeze him, and he could dodge it. It was the same for the divine light of heaven and earth. The bone Douluo stood where he was, but that didn't mean that he wouldn't dodge. The mysterious underworld flying sword in his hand shone brightly. When it neared the bone Douluo, Wang Feng spun his sword and suddenly, 6 sword projections appeared in mid-air. The 6 sword projections formed a white sword light. They intersected in mid-air and formed a sword net that attacked the bone Douluo. Seeing this move, the sword Douluo's eyes narrowed, and he took a deep breath. 7 Annihilation Swordplay. Sword of Duckweed. Although it's not perfect, he has truly comprehended it. He had no idea how many years he had spent practicing the 7 murders sword art. Back then, he had comprehended it through the sword intent of the 7 murders sword. He didn't expect that after just one fight, the other party would learn it. Who could be blamed for this? Who could have such monstrous talent? Now, the sword Douluo could only hope that Tang Wulin hadn't comprehended the last 2 moves. However, it was quite clear that the sword Douluo's hopes had been dashed. The 6 streaks of sword light struck the bone Douluo's golden light barrier, but they were only able to create faint ripples, and were completely ineffective. Humph! The bone Douluo looked on in a calm manner. Even though he was quite surprised, Old Sword had already warned him about this. Subsequently, the Netharism flying sword in Wang Feng's hand rose up once more, and numerous enormous strands of sword qi coiled around Wang Feng's body. In the end, they formed 6 sword qis of different lengths and shapes. They were like 6 huge dragons soaring into the sky and finally gathered in Wang Feng's palm. The sword qi, which contained 6 different sword intents, hurtled toward the bone Douluo again. Seeing this, the sword Douluo was astonished. 7 emotions soul destroyer? This move can't be executed just by comprehending it. How could he? The 7 emotions Soul Destroyer required several special emotions to be fused into the sword intent before it could be executed. Without a certain amount of experience, it would be difficult to execute it. At most, one could only imitate its form. But now, it seemed to be a little similar. The sword Douluo was extremely astonished. When the white-clothed Popetiff received his attack, he seemed to have used 6 streaks of sword light to block it. Could it be that he had already comprehended it then? At that moment, the sword Douluo's emotions were extremely complicated. At this moment, the 6 streaks of sword chi, which contained 6 different sword intents, were like 6 long dragons as they struck the bone Douluo's golden light barrier. The golden light barrier trembled incessantly, as if it had been dyed with 6 different colors, and it was constantly changing. The bone Douluo's expression still didn't change, but he couldn't help but feel astonished. After that, Wang Feng executed the last move of the 7 murders sword art, sword-splitting Southern Mountain. Actually, from the moves of the 7 murders sword art, Wang Feng guessed that the old master must have had a special experience when he was young. This was a move that gathered all his strength, and it was as if the sword could split the world. Its aura could be said to be grand and majestic, and it also carried a sense of severing. It was the strongest move among the 3 moves. This was Wang Feng's first time executing it, and he wasn't very familiar with it. It was far more majestic than when the sword Douluo had executed it. Naturally, it couldn't break the bone Douluo's golden light barrier. But it didn't matter. He couldn't finish it in one move, he could keep on attacking. Boom, boom, boom. Powerful air currents erupted in the entire plaza. Sword chi swept across, and sword light flashed like rainbows. In everyone's eyes, the white-clothed Popetiff seemed to be tireless as he executed every move of the 7 murders sword art. The more the sword Douluo watched, the more astonished he became. This was because the white-clothed man's comprehension was simply too fast. At the beginning, it seemed rather stiff, but after that, the white-clothed man became more and more familiar with every move, and it was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The sword Douluo's heart skipped a beat. He's using the bone Douluo as a testing stone. Evidently, the bone Douluo had also realized this. Damn it, this white-clothed Popetiff is really infuriating. At the beginning, he didn't think much of it, but later on, every move of his was from the 7 murders sword art. They were all sword techniques that he had learned from the sword Douluo. Thinking that he was being used as a testing stone, the bone Douluo couldn't help but feel a surge of anger in his heart. However, he wasn't angry. He only defended himself with an extremely gloomy expression. Although the white-clothed man was using him as a testing stone, it was obvious that the white-clothed man's soul power undulations were decreasing, and he couldn't cause much damage to him. In other words, the white-clothed Popetiff was about to die. His soul power was almost depleted. However, he didn't expend much soul power. This was because the white-clothed Popetiff couldn't break through his current defense at all. I'll let you try. Let's see what you're going to do if you don't have any soul power left. The bone Douluo snorted coldly in his heart. At this moment, Wang Feng retreated far away after executing another sword-splitting Southern Mountain. Wang Feng didn't have much soul power in his body. He had already executed the 7 murders sword art several times, and this sword art had consumed a lot of soul power. The bone Douluo couldn't help but smile when he saw this. Everything was going as he had expected. Although he was unhappy that he was being used as a testing stone, victory was already in his hands. Do you still want to continue? The bone Douluo said slowly. You can't break through my defense. I don't have much soul power left. Why not? Wang Feng said calmly. End of chapter. Chapter 575. The bone Douluo didn't say anything. He attacked Wang Feng directly. He wasn't slow. At least, he wasn't slower than Wang Feng. Right now, Wang Feng didn't have much soul power left. After fighting for so long, he was at his weakest. Wang Feng furrowed his brow when he saw the Bone Douluo attacking him. The Bone Douluo had been defending all this time. Wang Feng didn't know how strong his offensive abilities were. The Bone Douluo's fourth, sixth, and sixth soul rings lit up one after another as he charged towards Wang Feng. Following this, the Bone Douluo's body seemed to be covered by a layer of bone armor. His attributes increased tremendously. Sharp bone spikes appeared all over his body. While Wang Feng was thinking, the Bone Douluo had already attacked. The bone spear in his hand was more like a bone blade. Before he arrived, he threw the bone blade in his hand at Lin Feng. Wang Feng raised his brow. He changed his posture and dodged them easily. It was also at this moment that the Bone Douluo's fist, which was covered in bone spikes, came crashing down toward Wang Feng. Wang Fengxin was stunned. However, he didn't dodge. Ice reflection. The cauldron of heaven and earth appeared. His skin was covered by a layer of icy blue light. The Bone Douluo's fist landed on Wang Feng's chest. Wang Feng's expression changed. He felt as if the bone spikes on his fist could pierce his skin. A terrifying strength surged into his body. At the same time, the Bone Douluo's body flashed with a golden light. However, the Bone Douluo's palm was also covered by layers of ice. In the blink of an eye, he became an ice sculpture. Wang Feng retreated. He touched the blood on his chest. His heart sank. This must be the effect of a soul skill. Ice reflection only sealed the enemy's spirit. It didn't have any defensive effects. Therefore, Wang Feng was hit by this punch. This was the weakness of ice reflection. However, Wang Feng didn't hesitate when he saw that the Bone Douluo was completely sealed. He charged forward. He only had a few seconds. Wang Feng wanted to use the last bit of soul power. He had to see if he could exhaust his opponent. He also wanted to see if his opponent had any other tricks up his sleeve. Wang Feng's thoughts were correct. At this moment, Wang Fengxin suddenly felt an extremely dangerous premonition. Fortunately, Wang Feng's spiritual power was extremely strong at this time. Almost subconsciously, he dodged to the side. Rumble! The terrifying power directly smashed into the ground where Wang Feng was, creating a huge crater. Wang Fengxin was shocked. What was going on? The Bone Douluo has already been sealed by his spirit, so how can he still attack me? Was it really that strange? Wang Feng subconsciously looked back, but all he saw was a golden figure. Then, another feeling of extreme danger arose. Wang Feng suddenly leaped forward. Another huge explosion occurred at Wang Feng's original position. What followed was almost an endless barrage of attacks coming at Wang Feng from all directions. Wang Feng was caught off guard, unable to retaliate at all. He only felt that it was extremely strange because he didn't even have time to clearly see what was attacking him. In just a few seconds, Wang Feng had already received dozens of attacks. Most of the attacks were dodged, but he had also received quite a bit of damage. At this moment, the Bone Douluo had also recovered from his spirit seal. However, the Bone Douluo wasn't shining with golden light like before. Instead, he had returned to his original appearance. Seeing this, Wang Feng seemed to understand something. After dodging another attack by a hair's breadth, Wang Feng panted heavily as he looked at the Bone Douluo in front of him. Under the countless clouds, he saw a faint golden figure standing beside the Bone Douluo. As the clouds dissipated, Wang Feng finally saw what was attacking him. It was a faint golden skeleton formed from bones. This golden skeleton was about the same size as the Bone Douluo. Seeing this, Wang Feng was stunned. This is a martial soul? The teleportation-like attack just now seemed to be able to shuttle around and attack him at any time. Is that a martial soul? It was extremely strange. Wait, the Bone Douluo's martial soul can be possessed by a martial soul. It should be a beast martial soul. But how could his martial spirit attack me independently like a tool martial spirit? Wang Feng seemed to have thought of something, and he was shocked. Isn't this too strange? Don't tell me that the Bone Douluo's martial soul is a tool martial soul that can turn into a physical attack and possess a martial soul? Is this a joke? Wang Feng was shocked. It wasn't because of how strong this martial soul was, but because it was too strange. At this moment, Wang Feng recalled that the Bone Douluo was also known as the titled Douluo with the strangest attacks in the original novel. He rarely attacked, and almost no one could withstand his attacks. I see. When the ghost Douluo attacked me, his entire body seemed to flash with a golden light. His martial soul should have left his body then. However, he didn't expect to be sealed by my ice reflection soul skill. However, the spirit seal soul skill only sealed the Bone Douluo, and not his martial soul. At this moment, the golden skeleton fused with the Bone Douluo once again. The Bone Douluo continued to attack Wang Feng. After this wave of attacks, Wang Feng's soul power would be completely depleted. Evidently, the Bone Douluo also saw this. He didn't give Wang Feng any chance to rest. His martial soul could possess a martial soul and leave his body. Even if he was controlled, he wouldn't be able to control his martial soul unless he took the attack head-on. He was extremely difficult to deal with. At this moment, Ning Fengji and the rest also saw the situation. This white-clothed Popetiff is about to lose. However, his soul skill is indeed strong. If you had attacked him just now, you would have been frozen and in a dangerous state. Fortunately, you're experienced. After you saw him use his martial soul, you only used your sword chi to attack, and didn't attack him directly. Ning Fengji focused. Uncle Gu isn't affected by this move at all. His soul power is also in a depleted state. The sword Douluo nodded slightly. Although this white-clothed Popetiff was using Old Gu to train his sword skills, Old Gu was also very calm. He waited until Wang Feng's soul power was almost completely depleted, and waited for him to be exhausted. At this moment, the Bone Douluo punched Wang Feng again. Wang Feng's expression changed again, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Following this, the Bone Douluo turned into an ice sculpture again. However, very quickly, the golden skeleton that had left his body slashed towards Wang Feng again from an unknown angle. However, this time Wang Feng didn't dodge. Instead, he condensed what little soul force he had left on his shoulder where the bone blade was going to land. Boom! This golden skeleton was extremely strong. When it slashed down, its immense strength almost instantly shattered the ground beneath Wang Feng's feet. It was as if there was an earthquake. With Wang Feng as the center, the surrounding plaza cracked open. Wang Feng could be said to have been severely injured by this move. Even his shoulder had cracked open. However, the Bone Douluo's golden skeleton was also frozen into an ice sculpture. End of chapter. Chapter 576. Everyone was stunned. What's the use of that? He doesn't have any soul power now. Even if he forcibly controls it, he still has no chance of winning after a few seconds. Ning Rongrong was already captivated by the battle. She furrowed her brow as she spoke. She wasn't the only one. Everyone who was watching the battle had the same thought. Popetiff had paid the price of being injured to forcibly control the Bone Douluo and the golden skeleton. However, he had no soul power left. He couldn't win either. He couldn't attack at all. This thought flashed through the minds of the crowd. However, in the next moment, Wang Feng's torso soul bone suddenly lit up, and countless blood-red threads suddenly appeared behind his back. They quickly wrapped around the frozen Bone Douluo's body. In the next instant, the blood threads lit up. It was as if they were absorbing energy. They shone brightly. At the same time, Wang Feng's aura started to soar. Seeing this, everyone at the scene was stunned. 100,000-year soul bones, second soul skill, siphon. Countless soul power was sucked out of the bone Douluo's body by the blood vessel-like threads. That's right. This was the second soul skill of Wang Feng's 100,000-year soul bone that he had never used before. This soul skill could only be used effectively when the opponent was in a spirit-sealed state, where they couldn't resist. It could absorb his opponent's soul power. However, it could also be interrupted. It could only be used when his opponent didn't have any other tricks up his sleeve. Wang Feng had been hiding it until now. Sometimes it was because he didn't have a chance to use it. Other times it was because it was useless. The main reason was that Wang Feng had sufficient soul power. He rarely ran out of soul power. Right now, this soul skill could unleash its power. At a speed visible to the naked eye, Wang Feng's aura began to skyrocket, and the injuries on his body healed even faster. The injuries that he had sustained earlier were almost completely healed. After a few seconds, the ice shattered. The bone Douluo's face turned pale. He looked at Wang Feng in astonishment. He felt that almost 20% of his soul power had been sucked away. It didn't seem like much, but he was a rank 95 titled Douluo. Right now, the bone Douluo couldn't say a complete sentence as he looked at Wang Feng, who was recovering slightly. He wasn't the only one. Everyone on Hu Liena's side was stunned too. Who would have thought that Lord Popetiff would have such a soul skill? From the looks of it, it seemed to be another soul skill of the soul bone. It could be said to be a comeback. Let's call it a draw. However, Wang Feng did not make a move. He only uttered 3 words quietly. These 3 words were so similar. The bone Douluo's expression was rather grim. If they continued fighting like this, the other party wouldn't be able to hurt him, but it would be impossible for him to defeat the other party in a short period of time. It wasn't a battle of life and death. His opponent's 2 soul skills were simply too powerful. A powerful crowd control skill, coupled with a soul power absorption skill, could be said to be a perfect combination. In the end, if they continued fighting, both sides would suffer. Moreover, he couldn't unleash his martial soul true body. Otherwise, his battle prowess would be greatly reduced if he was hit by his opponent's rainbow divine light. If he didn't use his martial soul true body, the rainbow divine light wouldn't be able to reach him. After thinking for a long while, the bone Douluo heaved a faint sigh and nodded. Seeing this, many of the spectators fell silent. Wang Fengxin nodded slightly. It was enough for him to be able to fully master the 7 killings sword technique from the bone Douluo. Of course, he couldn't lose. If he, the white-clothed Popetiff, lost, his reputation in the martial soul hall would be greatly affected. This was naturally disadvantageous for him. However, it wasn't very realistic for him to defeat the sword Douluo and the bone Douluo consecutively. Furthermore, it would easily arouse the martial soul hall's suspicion. The combined strength of the 2 of them was even stronger than the golden alligator Douluo. If he could suddenly defeat both of them, it would be too fake. The Bibidan might even suspect something. Therefore, a draw was the perfect choice. Being able to draw with 2 titled Douluo consecutively from the 7 treasure glazed tile sect was enough to shock the entire continent. The bone Douluo walked back from the plaza. He looked at Ning Fengji with an apologetic gaze. Fengji, I'm sorry. Ning Fengji regained his senses and shook his head. However, his gaze became even more serious. That soul skill of his should be a soul skill from his soul bone. His soul bone should also be a 100,000-year soul bone. The sword Douluo lowered his voice and said, "This person is very scheming. He has been hiding his strength all this time. He came to seek advice from me and comprehended the 7 killing swordsmanship from me. Then, he used you as a test stone to practice his swordsmanship to the point of perfection. He was completely making use of the both of us. In the end, he still had a firm grasp of the situation. 100,000-year soul ring, 100,000-year soul bone, a multitude of tricks, a mysterious martial soul, and a peerless comprehension ability, All of these allowed him to achieve such results. The sword Douluo heaved a long sigh and said, "If I had known earlier, I would have used the 7 killing swordplay from the start and defeated him directly." Although he said that, the sword Douluo only shook his head. He didn't know his opponent's strength, just like how Wang Feng didn't know that the sword Douluo had the 7 killing swordplay. The martial soul hall actually produced such a freakish popediff. Ning Fengji's voice was also a little low. "I really don't know what will happen to the continent in the future." The two-titled Douluo fell silent. At this moment, on the other side, Hulaina and the others were looking at Wang Feng with admiration. "He's too strong. Look, sister, I told you. Lord Popediff has great foresight. He's already prepared." Evil Moon chuckled. Hulaina didn't answer him. Her eyes were fixed on the white figure in front of her. It seemed like she couldn't see anyone else. "Lord Popediff is really too strong," Yen said sincerely. "In our martial soul hall, only the second reverend can defeat the sword Douluo and bone Douluo in a battle of attrition. Lord Popediff deserves his position as the third consecrator. After today's battle, Lord Popediff's name will truly resound throughout the continent." Thomas nodded silently. He had seen everything clearly. When he returned, he would report to the entire martial soul hall. Wang Feng walked towards Ning Fengji and said, "In today's battle, the two-titled Douluo from your sect are very strong. However, the next time we meet, it won't be a draw." His tone was calm. It seemed like he wasn't happy about this result. Ning Fengji's eyes narrowed. He snorted and didn't answer. "Next time, it won't be a draw." The bone Douluo snorted. The sword Douluo didn't say anything. He just stared at Wang Feng. He sighed in his heart. How good would it be if this person was his descendant? The 7 killings sword martial soul would definitely be able to shine brightly in his hands. It might even be comparable to the number 1 tool martial soul on the continent, the Clear Sky Hammer. This was a genius who could learn his 7 killings swordplay and comprehend the 7 killings sword chi and sword intent in one battle. End of chapter. Chapter 577. In fact, Wang Feng had comprehended the 7 killings sword technique. However, he could only rely on the bone Douluo to cultivate it to such a level because of the blood patterns. Otherwise, it would have been a little difficult. "Does Popediff intend to rest in my sect?" Ning Fengji was silent for a moment before he asked politely. Wang Feng waved his hand and said, "There's no need. I still have to go to the Blue Lightning Tyrant sect and the other martial soul halls. Let's part ways here." He was afraid that Ning Rongrong would notice something if he rested here for a day. That would be troublesome. Leaving as soon as possible was the best plan. Therefore, Wang Feng still couldn't sense Ning Rongrong. He didn't know how much Ning Rongrong had changed. Ning Rongrong didn't say anything either. She only stared at Popediff and snorted coldly. After Wang Feng left with Hulaina and the rest, Ning Rongrong couldn't help but speak. "Wang Feng's current strength is definitely much stronger than this white-clothed Pope." Hearing this, Ning Fengji and the rest laughed bitterly. In this girl's heart, Wang Feng probably didn't care about anything. However, thinking about it, that fellow was already able to fight 2 rank 92 titled Douluo alone 4.5 years ago. 4 years had passed, and if he was still around, he might not necessarily be much weaker than this white-robed Pope. He was also a peerless monster. It was a pity, silly girl. Ning Fengji looked at the disappearing black light in the distance. His eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. Several days later, Popediff ascended the 7 treasure glazed tile sect and fought 2 titled Douluo to a draw. News of this spread to every corner of the continent. At this moment, Popediff's name was truly imprinted in the hearts of countless people. Half a month later, Popediff ascended the Blue Lightning Tyrant sect and challenged the sect leader, Yu Yuanjin, who was a rank 96 titled Dalu. There were quite a few people watching this battle. Among them, Lu Erlong was the most special. Grandmaster also returned to his family, which was a rare occurrence. He brought Tang San, who was still cultivating in the Moon Pavilion, to the Blue Lightning Overlord sect. Normally, non-members of the sect were not allowed to watch a battle of this level. Because this involved many secrets of the Blue Lightning Overlord sect, it wouldn't be good if outsiders saw it. Originally, the elders of the sect wanted to refuse. The Blue Lightning Tyrant sect had always been in a neutral state, not siding with the two empires or the martial spirit palace. As the continent's #1 beast martial spirit, they naturally had their own pride. It was almost impossible for them to rely on any power. But Yu Yuanjin said that if we refuse to even ask for guidance, what will the sole masters of the continent think of our Blue Lightning Tyrant sect? Therefore, Yu Yuanjin naturally planned to accept the challenge. Blue Lightning Overlord sect. I haven't been back for a long time. The Great Master was wearing a gray robe. He had a complicated expression on his face as he looked at the large group of families in front of him. The structure of the sect was a little different from the 7 treasure glazed tile sect. It was built on a plain near the city. The soil here seemed to be very special. Even the surrounding plants had some lightning energy. It was very suitable for the disciples of the Blue Lightning Overlord sect to cultivate. It was a natural training ground for mimicry. As one of the 3 upper sects, it was normal for them to have such an excellent place for cultivation. In such a place, the disciples of the Blue Lightning Overlord sect would be slightly stronger. This was also why Yu Yuanjin agreed to ask for guidance. If he could defeat this white-clothed Popediff, wouldn't it mean that the Blue Lightning Overlord sect was stronger than the 7 treasure glazed tile sect? Among the 3 upper sects, the Blue Lightning Overlord sect had always been ranked last. The reason was very simple. Excluding martial souls, the disciples' talents, and other factors, it was actually because the 7 treasure glazed tile sect had 2 titled Douluo. If the white-clothed Popediff tied with the 2 titled Douluo in succession. If Yu Yuanjin could defeat this white-clothed Popediff, wouldn't the Blue Lightning Overlord sect's status be raised? This place is a treasure trove. Tang San followed behind the Grandmaster. He was wearing the Blue Lightning Overlord sect's clothes and muttered as he looked around. These clothes were all prepared for him by Lu Erlong. After all, this place was usually not for people outside the sect. Little San, you should be graduating from the Yuxian soon, right? Your aura is becoming calmer. Lu Erlong asked. Currently, only the Grandmaster and Lu Erlong knew that Tang San was cultivating in the Yuxian. At first, only the Grandmaster knew, but now that he was with Lu Erlong, he naturally knew. Yes, there are still 3 months. Tang San nodded slightly. My aunt told me that I will graduate in 3 months. I can leave the Yuxian after that. When the time comes, I will go back to find my father and ask him to tell me about my mother. This white-clothed Popediff is very likely to go to the Clear Sky sect. The Grandmaster suddenly said. 4.5 years had passed, but the Grandmaster and Lu Erlong didn't change much. The Grandmaster had consumed the immortal herb Tang San gave him, and Lu Erlong's cultivation was very high, so the changes were very small. The Clear Sky sect? Tang San was stunned. Based on my guess, after you graduate from the Yuxian, your father will very likely let you go to the Clear Sky sect with your current changes. I just don't know when this white-clothed Popediff will go. The Grandmaster walked slowly along the bluestone path into the sect. He was in disguise, and there were very few Blue Lightning Overlord sect disciples on the way. They were all gathered in the square outside the Overlord Palace. Tang San was silent. He came here naturally to see this white-clothed Popediff's strength. More than half a month ago, outside the Martial Spirit Temple in Heavendo City, the old poison was defeated too quickly, and the other party didn't show much of his strength. He was hiding his identity now, so it wasn't appropriate for him to ask about the battle of the 7 treasure glazed tile sect. The 7 treasure glaze tile sect also wouldn't casually reveal the details of the battle. Moreover, being able to see it with his own eyes was naturally different. Soon, the group walked to the center of the Blue Lightning Overlord sect, the square outside the Overlord Palace. This was the usual training ground of the sect, and it was very big. The lightning aura here seems to be denser. Tang San's heart skipped a beat. It seems that there's something special under the square. The white-clothed Popetiff is here. Lu Erlong looked forward and whispered. Tang San looked over. After not seeing him for more than half a month, the white-clothed Popetiff was still as charming as ever. At this moment, he was standing in a corner of the square, looking ethereal. Many gazes were fixed on him, but they didn't make him change at all. On the other side was Yu Yuanjin. Wang Feng stood in the square and looked at Yu Yuanjin. The Blue Lightning Overlord sect's location was rather unique. It wasn't in the 2 empires, and at most, it was in a nearby city. This place was also very unique. Wang Feng could sense it as soon as he arrived. This place was a natural magnetic field. Of course, it was naturally different from the magnetic field in his previous life. This place contained very rich magnetic and electric energy. Wang Feng didn't know why. It could be because of the changes in the terrain, or it could be because of some special treasure. End of chapter. Chapter 578. However, compared to the extreme north, the lightning purple forest in the Myriad Elephant Valley was much weaker. Soul Masters couldn't stay in the lightning purple forest. However, the Blue Lightning Overlord sect was very suitable for Soul Masters to cultivate. To be precise, it was very suitable for a martial soul like the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon. Other lightning-type martial souls were also very suitable. This was even more suitable than the simulated environment in those academies. Good place. Wang Feng thought to himself. Yu Yuanjin accepting my advice must be because this place will give him a huge boost in strength, right? He looked at Yu Yuanjin. There was almost no description of the Blue Lightning Overlord sect master in the original novel. There might be some later, but Wang Feng wasn't sure. Compared to the sword Douluo, this Yu Yuanjin was even more unfamiliar. However, the 2 of them were about the same age. They were both old men. Yu Yuanjin wore a blue robe. His hair was snow white, and his figure was majestic. His aura was domineering, and his eyes were cold. At the same time, he was Grandmaster's father. He seems to be the only titled Douluo in the Blue Lightning Overlord sect, Wang Fengxin said. Wang Feng also saw many familiar figures, such as Yu Tianheng, Yu Tianxin, and even Duguyen from the Imperial Battle Team. Duguyen and Yu Tianheng had always been a couple. Judging from his aura, Yu Yuanjin's strength shouldn't be inferior to the sword Dalu. In this place, he should be even stronger. Little Three and Grandmaster are also here? Wang Feng could clearly sense Little Three and Grandmaster's aura. However, the 2 of them should be in disguise. In the original novel, Grandmaster had fallen out with his family. After the Blue Lightning Overlord sect was destroyed, he didn't have the chance to go back. He didn't expect that he would secretly return to his family. It seems that my name as the White Popetiff has spread far and wide. Bibidon should be very satisfied now, right? Wang Fengxin thought to himself. Once the 3 upper sects were dealt with, it should be much easier to go to the Star Luo Empire. If the 3 lower sects were tactful, they should obediently submit. At this moment, an elder from the Blue Lightning Overlord clan suddenly spoke in a loud voice. Begin. As soon as he finished speaking, a loud and clear dragon roar was heard. The blue dragon, surrounded by lightning, suddenly noticed Yu Yuanjin. Its huge eyes flickered with lightning as it stared at Wang Feng. The 8-meter-long blue lightning Tyrannosaurus entered Yu Yuanjin's body. In an instant, Yu Yuanjin began to undergo drastic changes. Martial spirit possession. The blue lightning tyrant dragon martial soul's special characteristic was that it could transform into a dragon. The higher its rank, the more parts it could transform into a dragon. At Yu Engine's level, his entire body could transform into a dragon. Yu Engine's body began to be covered with a layer of dense dark purple scales. His body rapidly grew until he was almost 3 meters tall, like a giant. However, his 2 beards and his feet were covered, and his body below his head was almost completely dragonized. It was filled with a feeling of extreme power. His entire body was surrounded by lightning, and a tyrannical aura was released from his body. Vaguely, it seemed to form a special energy flow with the ground of the plaza. It was extremely extraordinary. 9 soul rings rose from Yu Engine's body. It was also a standard configuration. His aura is not weaker than old Master Jian's at all, and it's slightly stronger. It seems that it's due to the terrain. Wang Feng's heart moved, but he smiled faintly in his heart. The 3 upper sects were united. Yu Engine didn't use his martial soul true body, so he must have heard some news. After all, the Blue Lightning Tyrannosaurus sect had fought 2 titled Douluo to a draw. With the strength of the Blue Lightning Tyrannosaurus sect, they would naturally find a way to inquire about the details. He must have known the power of the divine light of universe, so he didn't use his martial soul true body. He planned to directly use his martial soul possession and use his strongest move to defeat him in a blitzkrieg battle. Sure enough, Yu Engine's aura soared, and even the plaza was covered with electric currents, as if there was an endless power rising from the ground. Following that, the 9 soul rings on Yu Engine's body flickered one after another, and several of them began to merge. Ring fusion. Wang Feng was slightly stunned. The technique of ring fusion had appeared in the competition before, so Wang Feng didn't find it strange. However, Yu Engine only fused the first 6 soul rings, and the last 3 soul rings were not fused. The power of the fusion of the 6 soul rings made Yu Engine's aura even more terrifying. Roar! Yu Engine suddenly roared, and it was actually a shocking dragon roar. Countless bolts of lightning gathered on Yu Engine's body, and countless lightning patterns appeared on his claws, and a violent power seemed to be about to pour out. 6-ringed soul skill, thunderous dragon fist. Yu Yuan trembled, and his huge body charged at Wang Feng at an extremely fast speed. Countless bolts of lightning spread from the ground, and the wind whistled. Seeing this, Wang Feng wanted to laugh. Logically speaking, he was actually the least afraid of the Blue Lightning Tyrant sect. The Blue Lightning Tyrant sect's special terrain boosted the strength of those who had the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon martial soul. But to him it was even more helpful, because Wang Feng took a deep breath, and the countless sharp blades in his hand gathered to form a mysterious underworld flying sword. The power of the blood patterns was activated, and countless powers gathered. Wang Feng didn't use the cauldron of heaven and earth, or his spirit seal soul skill. Right now, Yu Engine was a rank 96 titled Dalu. Even if he didn't use his martial soul true body, he seemed to be in a special state with the fusion of his 6 soul rings, and his attributes were greatly boosted. It was easy for him to dodge his spirit seal soul skill. Even if he was hit, it wouldn't be very effective. If he used Reflect Ice and Siphon, it would be impossible to defeat Yu Engine now, as his aura was too strong. Wang Feng even suspected that he would be severely injured if he took this soul skill head-on. Even if he practiced the 7-killing sword technique, he wouldn't be able to defeat Yu Engine. However, Wang Feng had the ultimate Wind Thunder Spear. No, more accurately speaking, it was the ultimate Wind Thunder Spear. This was Wang Feng's self-created ultimate skill. It used the power of the wind and lightning of heaven and earth, as well as his own understanding of the concept, to fuse it into the spear. In fact, it wasn't limited to just spears, but swords too. After fighting the sword Douluo, Wang Feng had some understanding of swords. He could unleash great power with his sword. Most importantly, the terrain here was perfect for him to use it. This was the most important terrain. There were two styles of the ultimate Wind Thunder Spear. The first style was the absolute Wind Thunder Spear, which relied on the power of lightning from his divinized soul skill. The second style was the heavenly Wind Thunder Spear, which required the true power of wind and lightning. Therefore, this place was just right for him. Wang Feng spun his sword and roared. His soul power surged and countless bolts of lightning surged towards Wang Feng's body from the ground. The raging wind that was already howling rapidly revolved around Wang Feng's body, forming a hurricane that was so condensed that it was almost tangible. Light gathered from Wang Feng's sword, and two different types of energy, one green and one purple, gathered in his mysterious underworld flying sword. Heavenly Wind Thunder Spear. P.S. Seeking votes. Seeking votes. Seeking votes. Important things are repeated countless times. There are 4 more chapters later. End of this chapter. Chapter 579. At this moment, from afar, one could see that Wang Feng was surrounded by 2 different types of energy. A green hurricane gathered around Wang Feng, and the lightning energy on the ground gathered to form a purple lightning energy. It circled around the green hurricane and finally entered the Xianming sword in Wang Feng's hand. His aura increased tremendously. Wang Feng's sword was like a rainbow as he roared. His entire body was wrapped in the power of wind and lightning as he attacked Yu Yuanjun. Since his opponent wanted to end the battle quickly, Wang Feng naturally didn't want to drag things out. If he didn't know the ultimate wind and lightning spear technique, he might have had to drag things out against Yu Yuanjun. He had to use all his skills to suppress Yu Yuanjun. It was fine if he lost, but Yu Yuanjun was the sect leader of the Blue Lightning Tyrant sect. Wang Feng didn't believe that Yu Yuanjun didn't have any trump cards. Now that he had fused his 6 soul rings and combined with the terrain, he could form an attack that wasn't inferior to his martial soul true body. If his opponent had an even stronger trump card, Wang Feng really didn't have any hope. It had to be said that titled Douluo with top-tier martial souls were very strong. Especially rank 96 titled Dalu. Wang Feng's overall strength should be between rank 95 and rank 96 in his current state. This was also because he was using the divine light of heaven and earth to suppress his opponent's martial soul true body. Otherwise, Wang Feng would have a hard time dealing with a rank 95 transcendent Dalu. This was because a soul master who had activated his martial soul true body was on a completely different level. Wang Feng couldn't defeat a rank 96 titled Douluo with his martial soul true body. However, all soul masters' strength would be reduced in front of the divine light of heaven and earth. At this moment, Wang Feng used the Xianming flying sword and combined with the terrain to unleash his worldly tempest style. In addition to his current state, he could unleash the full strength of this move. Boom! It was like 2 shooting stars colliding, and there was an intense explosion of light. A terrifying shockwave spread out in all directions, forcing the spectators to retreat over 10 steps. Those with lower soul force levels were directly blown away. The boundless airwaves turned into fog that instantly enveloped the entire plaza. Lightning flashed in the fog from time to time. Everyone present watched this scene closely. They didn't know how it would turn out. Soon, the fog dissipated. 2 silhouettes stood in 2 different positions. The scales on Yu Yuanjun's body fell off, and a wound extended from his dragonized claw to his arm. Blood flowed down his claws and dripped to the ground. His face was filled with shock. On the other side, the white-robed Popediff only had his sleeve torn, which extended all the way to his shoulder. His arm was faintly purple in color, as if it had been corroded by a special energy, but there were no injuries. The tempest of heaven and earth did not disappoint Wang Feng. Unlike the 7 kills swordsmanship, this move gathered the power of heaven and earth. In terms of power, it was even more powerful. However, there was a limit to it and it could not be released at any time. From this point alone, it was slightly inferior to the Seven Murders swordplay. Yu Yuanjin's Thunder Dragon Fist was actually a similar soul skill. By fusing his 6 soul rings and strengthening his body, he was able to unleash it with the assistance of the lightning terrain. In addition, he was already extremely powerful, so their power was actually on par. Yu Yuanjin was shocked by this. A few days ago, he had personally gone to the 7 Treasure Glazed Tile sect to ask about the details of the battle. After all, the white-robed Popediff was about to arrive. He had to find out what his opponent was capable of. How could he defeat 2 titled Douluo? After asking around, he was quite confident that he could defeat his opponent with the help of the unique terrain of the Blue Lightning Overlord sect, even without using his martial soul true body. Who would have thought that the white-robed Popediff would have such an unpredictable move? Yu Yuanjin dared to guarantee that he had never seen that sword move before. It was definitely not the sword Douluo's 7 Murders swordplay. How could he be on par with him? This was his home ground. Thinking of this, Yu Yuanjin charged forward again. Wang Feng frowned slightly. This Yu Yuanjin is a little reckless. Again? Taste my tempest of heaven and earth. Logically speaking, Wang Feng could use it without any scruples in this place. The two immediately clashed again. Wang Feng didn't even use any other soul skills. Just the tempest of heaven and earth was enough to tie with Yu Yuanjin. The terrain was too useful for him. It was far more effective than any other soul skill. Furthermore, Yu Yuanjin had entered a special state after fusing his soul rings. He couldn't use any other soul rings. Although he was still very strong, he couldn't defeat Wang Feng. Wang Feng became braver as the battle went on. He used the tempest of heaven and earth with the dark mystic sword. Although he was still a little shaky at first, he became more proficient and more powerful. The sword intent grew stronger, and the power of wind and thunder filled the entire area. However, although this move borrowed the power of wind and thunder, it still consumed a lot of soul power. After another round of confrontation, Yu Yuanjin panted heavily. He couldn't help but want to activate his martial soul true body. But thinking of Ning Fengji's advice, Yu Yuanjin suppressed it. His opponent had a soul skill called the Rainbow Divine Light that could lower the quality of his martial soul. Once he activated his martial soul true body, he would be hit directly. His strength would be greatly reduced, and he would definitely lose. At this moment, the white-robed Popediff slowly opened his mouth. Sect Master you can't do anything to me. Let's call it a draw. Yu Yuanjin's body trembled when he heard this. He was a little unwilling. What kind of strange sword skill was that? How could it be so powerful? With such a powerful sword skill, why couldn't he defeat those 2 old fellows in the 7 Treasure Glazed Tile sect? One had to know that Yu Yuanjin was on his home ground, and in this terrain, his strength was slightly stronger. Even he was beaten to this extent, Yu Yuanjin was a little confused. In the end, Yu Yuanjin sighed and nodded. Then let's call it a draw. If we continue fighting like this, we won't be able to determine the winner. After he finished speaking, the crowd was in an uproar again. Many disciples of the Blue Lightning Tyrant sect looked at each other. They didn't expect their sect master to be unable to defeat the white-robed Popediff in his home ground. Another draw? Strange. Why didn't Uncle Yu use his martial soul true body? Lu Erlong frowned. Father, his current state is only slightly weaker than his martial soul true body, the master said in a low voice. A soul skill like the Thunder Dragon Fist is extremely powerful. It needs to be combined with a special terrain to unleash it, but this Popediff's sword skill seems to be even more profound and mysterious. If I'm not mistaken, it also uses the terrain. There might even be other forces. Tang San also watched with rapt attention. He watched every second very carefully. He understood a little bit. His teacher was right. The white-robed Popediff's sword skill not only used the terrain, but also the wind. It merged into a more powerful force of heaven and earth, and when it was unleashed, it was a draw with Yu engine. And he only used that one move. End of chapter. Chapter 580. He's really strong, Tang San said softly. He didn't use his martial soul true body. He must have gotten some information from sect leader Ning, and has some reservations. Master continued, it seems like this white-robed Popetiff is unbelievably strong. He probably has some method or soul skill that can restrain his martial soul true body. If that's the case, any high-level soul master will be much weaker in front of him. Popetiff, this position has reappeared in the martial soul hall. This person is indeed qualified to ascend to this position. Master had always studied martial souls and soul skills. Although he hadn't been to the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile sect, he could guess some things. Doesn't that mean the martial soul hall has become stronger again? Lu Erlong couldn't help but ask. Tang San was silent. Master was also silent. At this moment, the white-robed Popetiff didn't have any intention of staying after the battle ended. He directly flew into the sky with Hulaina and Bishop Thomas on his sword and left. A few days later, the white-robed Popetiff tied with the rank 96 Yu engine in the Blue Lightning Overlord sect. The world of Soul Masters was shaken again. 2 of the 3 upper sects had already been tied. Many Soul Masters couldn't help but sigh. This white-robed Popetiff was already a force to be reckoned with. Another month later, there were only a little more than 2 months left before the deadline of 5 years was up. The white-robed Popetiff finished his inspection of the martial soul hall in the Heaven Do Empire. Wang Feng stepped on the road to the Star Luo Empire. The martial soul hall didn't seem to know the location of the Clear Sky sect. Since they couldn't find it, then forget it. However, Wang Feng took some time to visit Nodding City when he was inspecting the martial soul halls in the various cities of the Heaven Do Empire as the white-robed Popetiff. More than 10 years had passed, but Nodding City hadn't changed much. Wang Feng even saw Su Yuntao. However, Su Yuntao had become the Grand Deacon of Nodding City's martial soul hall and was about to be promoted to bishop. When Wang Feng returned to Nodding City, he was deeply moved for quite a while. When he was traveling the continent, Wang Feng didn't return to Nodding City because he was traveling by chance. He didn't expect that he would actually return to Nodding City and see Su Yuntao when he was patrolling the continent as White Popetiff. However, Su Yuntao did not help anyone awaken their martial souls. Su Yuntao and the girl named Cici were married. Their child was already a few years old. This made Wang Feng sigh. Time spares no man. When Wang Feng arrived at the Star Luo Empire, things were much smoother than when he had first begun his patrol. This was because White Popetiff's name had spread across the entire continent. The royal family of the Star Luo Empire didn't have much interest in fighting to a draw with the top-tier titled Douluo of the 2 great sections. Although there were titled Douluo who were even stronger than Dugubo, none of them had any intention of fighting the white-clothed Popetiff. However, Wang Feng had a whole new level of respect for the Dean of Ares College. As a patrol, he didn't participate in the affairs of the various academies. However, this Dean of Ares College took the initiative to challenge Wang Feng and was defeated in a few moves. Although he was defeated, he still had some vigor. It was a pity that this Dean of Ares College was only rank 92. His abilities were average. After resting for a day in the Martial Soul Temple in Star Luo City, Wang Feng went to 3 of the remaining 4 sects in the Star Luo Empire. It was worth mentioning that the Martial Soul Temple in Star Luo City was slightly stronger than the Martial Soul Temple in the Heaven Do Empire. Just the Soul Douluo alone numbered 4. There were also 2 Platinum Bishops and 6 Red Bishop. The rest of the Soul Masters were also slightly more numerous than the rest. It was probably because the Star Luo Empire was stronger than the Heaven Do Empire that the Martial Soul Temple here was much stronger. Furthermore, Wang Feng guessed that there should be even stronger titled Douluo in the Star Luo Empire. In fact, Wang Feng discovered that the martial soul temples in the Star Luo Empire's cities were slightly stronger. This indirectly showed that the Star Luo Empire was indeed stronger than the Heaven Do Empire. Otherwise, the martial soul temple wouldn't be able to suppress them. While patrolling the martial soul temple in the Star Luo Empire, Wang Feng also followed the route to find the remaining 3 sections: the Medicine Spirit Sect, the Weapon Cauldron Sect, and the Battle Luo Sect. These 3 sects were actually very special. They could be said to be of the same lineage. In the end, they were divided into 3 branches, each with their own home. The Medicine Spirit Sect is a very special sect. Thomas introduced them to Wang Feng on the flying sword. Our martial soul temple doesn't know much about them. We only know that the martial soul of every disciple here is a type of medicinal herb. They are all good at fighting, but they are also very good at cultivating all kinds of medicinal herbs and healing. Thomas paused and continued, "Does Lord Popediff know about the 9-hearted begonia?" Wang Feng nodded slightly. The description of the 9-hearted begonia in the original book was limited to Yi Lingling from the Imperial Battle Team. In fact, Yi Lingling came from the Medicine Spirit Sect. However, the 9-hearted begonia was passed down to only one disciple. She was also a genius disciple in the Medicine Spirit Sect. However, the Medicine Spirit Sect didn't like the outside world, so they didn't set up an academy. However, this sect was very rich, second only to the 7 treasure glazed tile sect. Hearing this, Wang Feng was stunned. Yi Lingling came from the Medicine Spirit Sect? In the original book, Yi Lingling only appeared 2 or 3 times. The powerful healing ability of the 9-hearted begonia was also rarely revealed. He didn't expect her to come from this sect. The relationship between the Medicine Spirit Sect and our martial soul temple is more of a cooperation. They give priority to selling the medicinal herbs they cultivate to our martial soul temple. Thomas said in a low voice, "They usually don't sell to other powers. It can be considered a form of attachment to us. However, in reality, they are not under our jurisdiction. The soul masters of the Medicine Spirit Sect can display great strength on the battlefield. The medicinal herbs they cultivate are very useful to us soul masters." Wang Feng nodded. He had a rough understanding of these 3 sections. There was a reason why the martial soul temple could have so many titled Douluo and nurture so many soul masters. They probably had an inseparable relationship with the Medicine Spirit Sect. It's also because of this that it's not easy to make them submit. Thomas thought for a while. His Majesty the Pope tried before but failed. If not for the Medicine Spirit Sect's great use, His Majesty the Pope would have destroyed them long ago. Towards the end, Thomas lowered his voice. Only Wang Feng could hear it. Wang Feng smiled faintly. It wasn't difficult to make the Medicine Spirit Sect submit. To him, it was very simple. Soon, Wang Feng arrived at the Medicine Spirit Sect. The Medicine Spirit Sect was located in a small valley. It wasn't a rare treasure ground like the Icefire Yin-Yang Well. However, it was a good place with rich heaven and earth energy. This valley wasn't big, and it looked like a paradise. The Medicine Spirit Sect didn't have a large population, only about 100 people. Only half of them were soul masters. In comparison, it was very little. On the entire continent, most of the soul masters with healing abilities were here. Furthermore, most of them weren't of high ranks. End of this chapter. Chapter 581. Medicine Spirit Valley was the name of this valley. The strongest sect master, Yao Sun, only had the strength of a soul Douluo. His martial soul was a white-bearded ginseng. His combat power was weak, but his healing power was strong. He was only slightly inferior to the 9-hearted begonia. Yao Sun was about 70 years old, but he looked like a middle-aged man in his 50s. It could be said that he took good care of himself, and had an extremely long lifespan. This was another characteristic of the medicine spirit sect. Compared to soul masters with other martial souls, soul masters from the medicine spirit sect could generally live about 30 years longer. After Wang Feng had stated his intentions, the medicine master smiled in a very good-natured manner. He wasn't as rebellious as Huyenjun, but he was not easy to deal with. You want our medicine spirit sect to completely submit to your martial spirit palace? Yao Sun said with a smile. Your Holiness Popedif, we rarely leave the valley, but we have heard of your deeds recently. To put it bluntly, your strength is much stronger than all of us combined. If we use force, we can't beat you. We have cooperated with your martial spirit palace for many years. So, I don't want to make things difficult for you. As long as you can fulfill any one of the two conditions, our medicine spirit sect will completely submit to you. Yao Sun's words were very interesting. He was not talking about submitting to the Pontiff Palace, but submitting to you. Wang Fengxin's heart moved and he said calmly, What conditions? It's very simple. First, our medicine spirit valley has a medicinal herb called the 10,000-year sea heart flower. It has been cultivated for decades and is about to wither. If you can cure it, you will succeed in fulfilling the conditions. Secondly, our medicine spirit valley also has 100 herb king, the 7 emotions and 6 desires grass. Our medicine spirit sect has an ancestral rule that whoever can consume this 7 emotions and 6 desires grass and remain undying, insane, foolish, and shedding tears, our medicine spirit sect will submit to that person. Yao Sun slowly finished speaking and looked at the white-clothed Popedif in front of him. As long as you can fulfill one of these two conditions, it will be fine. Thomas wiped his cold sweat from behind. He had heard of these two conditions. When His Holiness first visited the Medicine Spirit Valley, it was also these two conditions. His Holiness did not choose the first one at that time, because she didn't understand herbs at all. Therefore, he chose the second option. His Highness the Pope swallowed the grass of 7 emotions and 6 desires. He did not die, he did not go crazy, he did not become stupid, 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 but he did shed tears. In the end, the Medicine Spirit Valley had no choice but to cooperate with him. At that time, Thomas was still with him, along with many cardinals. No matter which of these two conditions it was, it could be said that it was difficult to achieve. However, the people of the Medicine Spirit sect were just that stubborn. If they couldn't do it, killing them would be useless. Wang Feng chuckled after hearing that. Others might not be able to fulfill these two conditions, but to him, it didn't seem difficult at all. All right, let's go first. Take me to see your 10,000-year sea heart flower. Wang Feng said slowly. Thomas, you guys wait for me here. There's no need to follow me. Okay. Thomas nodded. Yao Sun was slightly taken aback, but he didn't say anything. He brought Wang Feng to a medicinal field. The quality of the herbs cultivated by the Medicine Spirit Valley was all right, but no matter how hard they were cultivated, they were far inferior to the herbs cultivated naturally in the icefire yin-yang well that gathered the essence of heaven and earth. The 10,000-year sea heart flower was the only immortal-grade herb cultivated by the Medicine Spirit Valley. One could imagine how rare it was for Tang San to encounter the icefire yin-yang well and find so many immortal herbs without any setback. Wang Feng glanced at the 10,000-year sea heart flower. This flower was somewhat similar to the 9-heart begonia. It had many uses. It could increase a soul master's cultivation speed, especially water-type soul masters. It could purify a soul master's soul power and make it purer. It could also cleanse one's marrow and body. It could be said that it had various effects. As an immortal herb, it definitely had many uses. However, at this moment, this 10,000-year sea heart flower had already withered. To be precise, it was because the energy of heaven and earth here was not enough to cultivate this 10,000-year sea heart flower. Immortal herbs could only grow for a long time in certain special environment. Otherwise, they would wither very quickly. Logically speaking, it was really not easy for the medicine spirit sect to cultivate this immortal herb for so long. Turn around and walk further away. Come back in 5 minutes. I will return you a fresh 10,000-year sea heart flower. Wang Feng said calmly. Only he and Yao Sun were in the nearby herb field. The other disciples of the medicine spirit sect had other matters to attend to and did not follow them. Yao Sun looked at the white-robed Popediff hesitantly. After thinking for a while, he realized that this immortal herb was already withered and did not have much use. He could not think of anything else. Thus, he followed Wang Feng's instructions and walked several hundred meters away. Wang Feng did not say anything and directly used his golden lotus to quickly heal this 10,000-year sea heart flower. His golden lotus could even mature immortal herbs. It was simply too easy to heal this kind of immortal herb. Now that there was no one around, no one would know. He would tell Thomas and the others later. He would just say that he used a special method and knew about immortal herbs. He just needed to know how to heal it. 5 minutes later, Yao Sun walked over. When he saw the fragrant immortal herb, he was stunned on the spot. It was like a dream. Unbelievable. Actually, before he even turned around, he already smelled the medicinal fragrance that he had not smelled in a long time. Ever since this sea heart flower had withered, he had never smelled that kind of medicinal fragrance that could make people go crazy. It's really healed. Yao Sun rubbed his eyes hard. How is it? Wang Feng said indifferently. The golden lotus's ability was unimaginably powerful. How did you do it? Yao Sun said in disbelief. It's a secret. Wang Feng shook his head. Oh right, don't you have another condition? Let me see the 7 emotions 6 desires grasp. At this time, Yao Sun quickly said, no need. 2 conditions. As long as you fulfill one, our medicine spirit sect will keep our word. You don't need to consume the 7 emotions 6 desires grass anymore. Their medicine spirit sect cared a lot about their reputation. Naturally, they would not go back on their words. However, Wang Feng said, no, I need it. Bring me to see it. Didn't your medicine spirit valley submit to me now? I order you to bring me to see the 7 emotions 6 desires grasp. Yao Sun. Yao Sun was sweating profusely as he looked at the white-robed Popediff. What kind of strange person is this? He actually wants to take the initiative to consume the 7 emotions 6 desires grass? That's very dangerous. Yao Sun had no choice but to bring Wang Feng to another herb field. Although it was called a herb field, in reality there were no herbs. Instead, there were countless withered grasses. In the middle of the withered grasses, there was a herb with 7 leaves that looked like a green foxtail. It was quietly growing in the herb field. Before he even walked in, Wang Feng could already feel a lonely aura. This 7 emotions 6 desires grass was discovered by our medicine spirit sect's founder a few hundred years ago. Its medicinal age is very short, only 44 years. End of chapter. Chapter 582. Yao Sun pointed at the grass of 7 emotions and 6 desires and said, there are no herbs that can grow around it. As long as you get close to it, you will immediately wither. Rumor has it that after consuming the grass of 7 emotions and 6 desires, you will experience the 7 emotions and 6 desires of the mortal world. No matter how strong one's will is, after consuming it, they will be stimulated by the taste and reveal all kinds of ugly behaviors. Its negative effects are far greater than its positive effect. Yao Sun sighed softly. Back then, after our founding master discovered and consumed the grass of 7 emotions and 6 desires, he established this rule for our medicine spirit sect. As long as someone is able to consume the grass of 7 emotions and 6 desires without being affected, it means that this person has already transcended the mortal world and is a celestial being. Our medicine spirit sect will naturally have a bright future if we submit to such a celestial being. After hearing this, Wang Feng laughed secretly. This was the logic. This founder was obviously very smart. This 7 emotions 6 desires grass was not something that ordinary soul masters could consume. According to Wang Feng's perception, this herb contained extremely terrifying negative energy. Once consumed, one's spirit power would be instantly destroyed. The richer the experience and the more complicated the emotions of a soul master, the harder it was to consume it. Only those with a pure heart and soul can consume it. Isn't this referring to me? Wang Fengxin thought to himself. Of course, there was another reason why Wang Feng wanted to consume this 7 emotions 6 desires grass. A few years ago, your martial spirit halls His Majesty the Pope personally came and consumed this herb. Yao Sun continued, Your Majesty the Pope is really powerful. He endured the 6 emotions and 6 desires and was not affected at all. But in the end, he shed tears and then left. Wang Feng thought for a while. Bibidon probably recalled some past events because of the herb? Death of love. He couldn't hold it back, so he was affected. However, Bibidon was able to withstand it with his powerful spirit power. It was not easy. Are you sure you want to consume it? Yao Sun looked at Wang Feng. After so many years, it would be bad if something happened to the only person who could cure the 10,000-year sea heart flower. Nonsense. Wang Feng walked over and lifted the mask slightly. Without saying anything, he directly plucked the 7 emotions 6 desires grass and swallowed it. Immediately, the power of the blood tattoo was activated. The moment he swallowed it, the medicinal power of the 7 emotions 6 desires grass transformed into countless different emotions that attacked Wang Feng's mind. Wang Feng snorted. 7 emotions and 6 desires. The so-called 7 emotions were happiness, anger, worry, thinking, sorrow, fear, and shock. The 6 desires were related to the 7 emotions. Different emotions and desires battered Wang Feng's heart. Wang Feng said that his soul was pure, and that was true. The red lotus karmic fire had tempered his body, and his soul was truly pure. It was impossible for such desires and emotions to destroy his spirit. However, Wang Feng had indeed seen many things that he had never seen before. He saw quite a few girls who were dressed seductively. They were bouncing around trying to seduce him. They even said that they would serve him together. Of course, Wang Feng knew that this was fake. It was too fake. It was not real at all. Therefore, he was very angry. He was so angry that he directly kicked them one by one and sent them flying. Wang Feng also saw himself becoming a god, going to a different world, and seeing the Douluo world 10,000 years later. Wang Feng also saw many other scenes. However, Wang Feng's soul, which had been tempered by the red lotus hellfire, was not affected at all. After looking at it, Wang Feng felt that the 6 blood traces on his body suddenly lit up. It was obvious that they were absorbing the countless chaotic emotions. At the same time, the 7th blood trace also lit up and grew rapidly. Seeing this, Wang Fengxin smiled. Sure enough, swallowing the 7 emotions 6 desires grass could strengthen the power of the blood traces and cultivate the dark angel martial soul. What surprised Wang Feng the most was that the 7th blood trace had also begun to strengthen slowly. The 7th blood trace was very special. Because it had absorbed the death god domain, its cultivation had been very slow. Wang Feng did not know what was going on. Unexpectedly, after swallowing the 7 emotions 6 desires grass and experiencing the impact of various emotions, it began to grow crazily. The 7th blood trace was extremely important. It was related to whether the original sin domain was formed or not. It was also related to the complete eruption of the blood trace's power. it would definitely produce an even more powerful increase. One must know that the consumption of Wang Feng's blood traces power was extremely great. Whether it was his mental power or soul power, it would be greatly consumed. Otherwise, Wang Feng would not have consumed so much energy when he fought with the sword Doulu. If the seventh blood trace was completely awakened, Wang Feng had a hunch that the side effects would disappear. Moreover, there would be an even stronger increase. Therefore, Wang Fengxin was pleasantly surprised when he saw the seventh blood trace growing rapidly. This was also the reason why Wang Feng had to swallow the 7 emotions, 6 desires grass. However, it was a pity that the 7th blood mark stopped when it was just a little bit away from the heart. On the other hand, the remaining 6 blood traces had become thicker and stronger. Back then, I cultivated for 2 years and only managed to open 6 blood traces. Now I can almost cultivate the 7th blood trace in an instant. It's not bad. The strength of the remaining 6 blood traces has also increased. I'm satisfied. Wang Feng was not greedy. The strengthening of 6 blood traces meant that the increase in strength when he activated the blood traces power would be even stronger. The harvest was huge. After absorbing it, Wang Feng nodded in satisfaction. After thinking for a while, he walked up to Yao Sun, who was still in a daze. Do you still have the 7 emotions, 6 desires grass? Yao Sun, what do you mean? Do you want to swallow another one? Yao Sun swallowed a mouthful of water and said in a trembling voice, No. No more. It's extremely difficult to cultivate the 7 emotions, 6 desires grass. We only managed to cultivate one in the past few years. Wang Feng was silent. The golden lotus might not be able to cultivate the 7 emotions, 6 desires grass. It required some special nutrient. These nutrients had nothing to do with the energy of heaven and earth. Just like the yearning heartbroken grass, it required a special method to activate. The golden lotus could not mature this herb that required special nutrient. What a pity! Wang Feng shook his head. Yao Sun suddenly knelt down and said in a low voice, From now on, the medicine spirit sect will submit to you, without any objections. Wang Feng waved his hand and said, You don't have to be so courteous. You have to submit to the martial spirit palace, not me. Don't say such ambiguous words in the future. Yao Sun was stunned. His eyes flashed and he nodded slightly. Outside the herb field, Hulaina and Thomas were waiting anxiously. It wasn't until he saw the pharmacist respectfully leading Sir Popediff out that he heaved a sigh of relief. Everyone, from now on, the herbal sect will completely submit to the martial spirit palace. Your Highness Popediff is truly miraculous. Not only was he able to cure my sect's 10,000-year-old sea heartflower, he was also able to swallow the grass of 7 emotions and 6 desires without being affected in the slightest. He is truly a celestial being. My medicine spirit sect is sincerely convinced. Celestial beauty? Wang Fengxin said. I, Wang Fengxin, have the bearing of a great emperor. So what if you have the bearing of a celestial? Thomas and Hulaina were stunned when they heard Wang Feng's words. Shortly after, they sucked in a breath of cold air and looked at Wang Feng in shock. P.S. I've finished the 10th update. Good night, dear readers. Don't forget to vote. End of chapter. Chapter 583. Pope's Palace. Bibidon slammed the table and stood up as he listened to the red-robed bishop's report. He really made the medicine spirit sect submit? Bibidon asked in a deep voice. His eyes were filled with shock. According to Thomas's report, that's the case. Huyanzhen has also returned from the forest in the extreme north. He also reported that the medicine spirit sect has submitted to the martial spirit hall. The red-robed bishop said respectfully. Bibidon was silent for a moment before he sat down slowly. Very good. If he can make the medicine spirit sect submit, then the remaining 2 sects should be no problem. Pass down my order. Tell Pope Diff to return to the Pope's palace as soon as he finishes his inspection. I will personally crown him." The red-robed bishop was slightly taken aback. He nodded and walked down. Inside the spacious hall, Bibi Dong's face was filled with surprise. "It seems like you have brought me more surprises than this." From making Huyen Zhen submit to him, to demonstrating against the imperial family of the Heaven Do Empire, to fighting two titled Douluo to a draw until now, when he heard that the Medicine Spirit sect had also submitted to him. Bibi Dong knew how stubborn the people of the Medicine Spirit sect were. Not only did Wang Wu cure the Medicine Spirit sect's 10,000-year sea heart flower, but he also consumed the 7 emotions 6 desires grass without any changes. This was something that even she couldn't do back then. I forgot that Wang Wu absorbs all kinds of emotions to cultivate. He is born unable to feel any emotions. This 7 emotions 6 desires grass has no side effects on him. Bibi Dong thought. Suddenly he thought, that must be why I dared to consume the 7 emotions 6 desires grass. What a strange person. The heavens are really helping me by allowing him to join the martial spirit hall. The remaining 2 sects shouldn't be a problem for him. Bibi Dong was extremely smart. Even though he wasn't present, he could analyze the situation. In fact, it was just as Bibi Dong expected. After the Medicine Spirit sect submitted, the remaining 2 sects wouldn't be difficult for Wang Feng. The Qi Cauldron sect was located in the southern part of the Star Luo Empire. This sect was quite interesting. It was originally called the Weapon Cauldron sect, but later it changed its name to the Qi Cauldron sect. The disciples of this sect mainly had tool martial spirits, and none of them had beast martial spirit. Furthermore, he had only inherited one cauldron-type martial soul, the profound Qi Cauldron. He knew how to use some of the more ancient cauldron refining technique. Combined with his soul skills, he could strengthen all kinds of sharp weapons, and even increase the strength of all kinds of tool souls, as well as refining all kinds of heavenly materials and earthly treasures. It was quite different from traditional casting. They were not good at forging, only at strengthening and modifying. Compared to the Medicine Spirit sect, the disciples of the Qi Cauldron sect were much stronger. As the sect master, Qi Lianshan was also a soul Dalu. He was only a hair's breadth away from becoming a titled Dalu. The various armors and weapons of the temple knights of the Martial Spirit Palace were all modified by them. In terms of usefulness, it was naturally not small. However, their cauldrons could not even compare to the universal cauldron. Furthermore, their cauldrons had been passed down for so many years that they had mutated. They no longer had a pure Xian Qi Cauldron martial soul. Similarly, the Qi Cauldron sect also made a request. First, they wanted to find the secret treasure they had forged back then. Second, they wanted to refine a piece of rare 1,000-year-old blood essence iron. Wang Feng discovered that the Qi Cauldron sect's foundation was very strong. This was because the Qi Cauldron sect was located in a rare natural mineral vein. There were many special and rare ores inside. Once these ores were fused into various armors and weapons, they would be greatly strengthened. It was also because of this that the Qi Cauldron sect was listed as one of the 4 lesser sections. Apart from their strength, they also had special strengthening and modification abilities. At the same time, they could greatly enhance their tool souls. Qi Lianshan's martial soul was called the 100 Smelting Cauldron. It was also a rare cauldron-type martial soul. Its defense was extremely strong. Out of the 8 soul skills, 7 of them were related to forging. They could refine all kinds of rare metals. This was a little similar to the Clear Sky sect. However, the Clear Sky sect was more of an offensive force. Their method of forging was step by step. First, they relied on hammers. Second, they relied on cauldrons. Actually, our Qi Cauldron sect is not inferior to the Clear Sky sect. Qi Lianshan was full of arrogance as he spoke. Wang Fengxin laughed secretly, but did not refute him. Qi Lianshan was a burly man. He was about 60 years old and had dark skin. When Wang Feng first saw him, he thought that he was from Africa. After taking a closer look, he realized that this burly man from Africa was slightly bleached. His big white teeth were very eye-catching. His face was full of sideburns. Sect Master Qi's tone is still so arrogant. Ha ha ha. Thomas laughed awkwardly behind him. The Martial Spirit Hall knew how strong the Clear Sky sect was. You said that you were not inferior, but as a member of one of the 4 lower sects, where did you get your confidence from? Humph, I know that the Martial Spirit Hall doesn't believe me. Qi Lianshan said arrogantly, about 100 years ago, our Qi Cauldron sect only passed down one cauldron called the Mystic Qi Cauldron. I'm sure you've heard of it. This cauldron can defend against the Clear Sky Hammer. The Clear Sky sect passed down the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique. I'm sure you've heard of it, right? Hearing this, Wang Feng nodded slightly. Of course he knew. Not only did he know, but he also knew how to use it. However, you definitely don't know that our Qi Cauldron sect once passed down a technique called the 108 Stages of Mystic Qi Cauldron Control. It specializes in countering the Clear Sky Hammer. Qi Lianshan had a nostalgic look on his face. It was as if he was recalling the glory of 100 years ago. This Mystic Qi Cauldron Control technique is profound and powerful. Once it's used, it can refine items that can't be refined in the world and defend against attacks that can't be countered in the world. The more Qi Lianshan boasted, the more arrogant he became. However, Wang Feng shook his head. If there really was such a special technique, it was impossible that the original work didn't mention it. At the very least, it would have some reputation. However, Wang Feng had never heard of it. There was a high chance that Qi Lianshan was just boasting. His ability to bluff was comparable to mine. Then, Sect Master Qi, can you help us cover up your Mystic Qi Cauldron Control technique? Thomas asked with a smile. It just so happens that His Holiness Pope Diff is here. Last time, when His Holiness came, you said that you hadn't learned it yet. Several years have passed. You should have learned a little, right? Qi Lianshan's face turned red when he heard this. He waved his hand and said, "This technique is very profound. Moreover, it has been lost for a long time. I didn't have the chance to comprehend it. Sigh, I know that you think I'm boasting. After all, our Qi Cauldron sect is only one of the 4 lower sections. Compared to the Clear Sky sect, the number 1 sect, we are far inferior. However, you don't know that many years ago this technique really did exist. However, later on, the Clear Sky sect produced many geniuses. They developed the Clear Sky Hammer and made the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique famous. However, our Qi Cauldron sect didn't have anyone to pass down this technique to, and no one was able to learn it. Even the authentic Mystic Qi Cauldron martial soul wasn't passed down. Time flew by, and that's why we ended up in our current situation. Not many people have even heard of its name. End of chapter. Chapter 584. The more Qi Lianshan spoke, the more silent he became. Toward the end, he could only sigh. Actually, if what Qi Lianshan said was true, then it was possible. Wang Fengxin thought. It was too difficult to master the chaotic cloak technique. Other than Tang San, not many disciples of the Clear Sky sect knew how to use it. It was too difficult. It would probably be lost in a few hundred years. It could refine items that could not be refined and defend against attacks that could not be blocked. If it was true, it was enough to show that the profound Qi Cauldron controlling technique was even more difficult to cultivate. Even the Qi Cauldron martial soul had evolved over time. Qi Lianshan's Qi Cauldron was not an authentic Qi Cauldron but 100 refinements cauldron. However, the Qi Cauldron sect was still one of the 7 great sects. However, the 108 practices of Qi Cauldron control technique correspond to the chaotic cloak hammer technique. It really does exist. Qi Lianshan shook his head and said, "Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. Lord Popediff, I've already stated my conditions. It's up to you to fulfill them." Wang Feng thought for a moment but did not reply. The Qi Cauldron sect's 2 conditions were quite troublesome. The first condition was to find a secret treasure. How long would it take to find it? The second condition was even more troublesome, to find a piece of blood iron essence. Although his cauldron of heaven and earth could be connected, it could only be used to refine soul crystals. Any natural treasures or rare ores would be refined into pure energy soul crystals. Unless Wang Feng had a special refining technique that would allow him to completely control the cauldron of heaven and earth. Lord Popediff's martial soul is also a cauldron. Could it be related to your Qi cauldron? At this moment, Huliana's heart skipped a beat as she whispered. Qi Lianshan was stunned. He shook his head and said, "The cauldron of heaven's martial soul does not come from the Qi cauldron sect. It has nothing to do with our Qi cauldron. However, if I can see it with my own eyes, I can help Lord Popediff appraise how powerful your cauldron of heaven's martial soul is." When he said that, a proud smile appeared on Qi Lianshan's face. As the sect leader of the Qi Cauldron sect, he had done a lot of research on cauldron martial souls. Of course, no matter what kind of cauldron-type martial soul, it definitely can't be compared to our profound Qi cauldron. After all, our Qi Cauldron sect's mysterious Qi cauldron was a top-notch martial soul that was comparable to the clear sky hammer. Regarding this point, Qi Lianshan was truly confident. Wang Feng didn't know where Qi Lianshan's confidence came from. "Incomparable?" Wang Feng said calmly. "Sect Master Qi, how about this? Let's not mention your request for now. If my martial spirit is more powerful than the profound Qi cauldron you speak of, how about your Qi cauldron sect directly submit to the martial spirit hall? If you think that my martial spirit is inferior to your profound Qi cauldron, then I will take them and leave. I will never mention the matter of surrendering." Qi Lianshan was stunned and couldn't help but laugh. "Then, Your Holiness Popediff, you may have to leave." It was the profound Qi cauldron martial soul. Although the Qi cauldron sect had already been lost and wasn't well known on the continent, the profound Qi cauldron. However, Qi Lianshan knew that this was the king of cauldrons. Among the tool spirits, it was comparable to the clear sky sect. How could there be a martial soul stronger than the profound Qi cauldron? At this moment, a scarlet light shone and Wang Feng turned his hand. The heaven and earth cauldron suddenly appeared. An ancient and mysterious aura slowly emanated from the cauldron. There were countless runes engraved on the surface of the cauldron, which seemed to contain the principles of heaven and earth. With a single glance, one would be deeply attracted. This cauldron couldn't be carefully examined. Because the patterns on the surface of the cauldron were too complicated, if one looked closely, they would be affected by the ancient aura emitted by the heaven and earth cauldron. The longer one looked at it, the more one would be immersed in it. Qi Lianshan was stunned the moment the heaven and earth cauldron appeared. This cauldron, the 100,000-year soul ring, dyed the heaven and earth cauldron a scarlet color, adding to its mysteriousness. "Sect Master Qi, have you appraised the heaven and earth cauldron?" Wang Feng continued. The heaven and earth cauldron formed by the chaotic green lotus was a treasure. Even if the people of Douluo world couldn't recognize it, Qi Lianshan, who considered himself an expert in cauldron martial souls, could feel the power of the heaven and earth cauldron. Qi Lianshan didn't speak. His eyes were fixed on the heaven and earth cauldron as if he had seen something incredible. Bang! Wang Feng's soul power slowly flowed out and the heaven and earth cauldron slowly solidified. It landed on the square and let out a muffled groan. Almost at the same time, all the cauldrons in the Qi cauldron sect trembled. It could be said that 10,000 cauldrons were resonating in unison. These patterns, Qi Lianshan walked in front of the heaven and earth cauldron and stroked its patterns. These patterns, Qi Lianshan's eyes glowed with infatuation. It was as if he was a car lover who had seen a limited edition sports car in the world. This cauldron, the more Qi Lianshan touched it, the more shocked he was. In the end, he couldn't even speak. Then, Qi Lianshan released his martial soul. The 100 refined cauldron was similar to the bronze cauldron Wang Feng had seen in his previous life. The surface of the cauldron was very rough and only had a few flame patterns carved on it. In front of the mysterious heaven and earth cauldron, it was like a fourth-rate star meeting a world-class superstar. They were on completely different levels. Qi Lianshan was speechless. After a long time, he bitterly smiled. Lord Popetiff, your heaven and earth cauldron is a cauldron-type martial soul that I have never seen before. Just its aura alone is much stronger than my sect's profound Qi cauldron. Moreover, it is extremely profound. I am unable to make an accurate judgment. However, when the heaven and earth cauldron appeared, my sect's 10,000 cauldrons resonated together. This is enough to explain everything. 10,000 cauldrons resonated together. Hearing this, Hulaina and the others seemed to feel honored and smiled. However, Qi Lianshan was still hesitant. Conditions, right? Wang Feng thought for a moment and decided to give it a try. I don't know about your sect's lost secret treasure, but my cauldron can also refine it. Give me the 1,000-year blood iron essence and I will give it a try. Qi Lianshan nodded. In fact, when he saw the cauldron, he had nothing to say about submitting. The cauldron's aura was too grand and ancient. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Qi Lianshan was omniscient about all the cauldron-type martial souls in the continent. However, he had never seen such a mysterious cauldron-type martial soul. The patterns on the cauldron's surface were even flowing slowly, as if they represented the changes in the world. Actually, our sect's lost secret treasure is a dagger. It was modified by our sect's ancestor. It is extremely sharp, but it was lost more than 10 years ago. It is indeed impossible to find it. Qi Lianshan sent someone to fetch a piece of 1,000-year-old blood iron essence and said, "However, Your Holiness, although this cauldron of yours is mystical, it requires the special techniques of our Qi cauldron sect to refine it. You don't know, the Clear Sky sect used hammers to forge. Qi Lianshan, on the other hand, used special soul power techniques to refine all kinds of rare materials. The profound Qi cauldron controlling technique was the most profound technique. It was as famous as the wild splitting wind hammer technique. It could be used to fight enemies and also to forge." End of chapter. Chapter 585. A dagger? A thought crossed Wang Feng's mind. He suddenly took out the god-slaying dagger that he had obtained from the capital of slaughter. "Is this the dagger?" Wang Feng asked. The god-slaying dagger belonged to the shadowless assassin in the infernal slaughterhouse. It was extremely sharp and could easily cut through Wang Feng's skin. Even many 10,000-year soul beasts couldn't resist the sharpness of the god-slaying dagger. When Wang Feng obtained it, he played with it for a while and felt that it was indeed extraordinary. It should have been specially forged. After that, he didn't use it much. This is the god-slaying dagger." Qi Lianshan was stunned when he saw the dagger. "Lord Popetiff, how did you get this god-slaying dagger?" He took the dagger and looked at it carefully for a moment. Then, he burst into laughter. "Ancestors above, I've finally found this dagger." Qi Lianshan was even more excited than when he saw the cauldron of heaven and earth. "Lord Popetiff, this dagger seems to belong to the shadowless assassin?" Hulaina said in surprise. "I didn't expect you to keep it. It's actually a treasure of the Qi cauldron sect." Hulaina had seen the battle between Wang Feng and the shadowless assassin, so she naturally recognized the dagger. Wang Feng nodded. "Sect Master Qi, isn't it just a dagger? Do you need to be so surprised?" Thomas sized up the dagger. Although he could feel that the dagger was extraordinary and could be considered a divine weapon, it was still a very powerful weapon. But to the Qi Cauldron sect, a divine weapon shouldn't be much, right? You don't know this. Qi Lianshan wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes, his face overflowing with joy. Do you know why the Qi Cauldron controlling technique I mentioned before was lost? Aside from the fact that no one could comprehend it, there was another reason. The technique was sealed in this god-slaying dagger. After a generation, dozens of years, the Qi Cauldron controlling technique was lost without a trace. We've been looking for this god-slaying dagger for a long time to find the Qi Cauldron controlling technique. Even if no one can comprehend it, we can't let this technique be completely lost. Qi Lianshan sighed. Hearing this, Bishop Thomas understood why he made such a request. It was related to the legacy of the sect. On the other hand, Wang Feng was curious. Could it be that the people from the Qi Cauldron sect also read the Heavenly Sword and Dragon Saber? Learning from the Heavenly Sword and the Dragon Saber, and putting those XX secret manuals into these divine weapons, could it be that he was also a transmigrator? Or could it be that these sect elders all liked to play this kind of game? Lord Popetiff, the fact that you've helped us find the god-slaying dagger is already a great favor to our sect. Qi Lianshan carefully held the god-slaughtering dagger and said solemnly, "Even if you didn't complete the other condition, we wouldn't have submitted to the martial spirit palace. However, as long as you have a request, our Qi Cauldron sect will definitely not refuse." Wang Feng waved his hand and said, "How about this? I'm interested in your Qi Cauldron controlling technique. You said that the god-slaying dagger has that technique. Can you take it out and let me have a look?" There was nothing he could do about it. Qi Lianshan had boasted a bit too much just now, so Wang Feng was a bit interested. "No problem." Qi Lianshan nodded. As he spoke, Qi Lianshan suddenly threw the god-slaying dagger into his 100 refinements cauldron. Following this, Qi Lianshan's 8 soul rings lit up one by one. Then, they revolved around the 100 refinements cauldron, and he quickly slapped the cauldron several times. After a short moment, the soul power fluctuations within the cauldron started to change and emit bursts of light. Almost every time Qi Lianshan slapped the cauldron, the 100 refinements cauldron would tremble violently. After a short moment, a faint red light rose up, and the god-slaying dagger disappeared. Only a pitch-black strip of cloth floated out of the cauldron. Qi Lianshan pulled the strip of cloth out of the cauldron, and the joy on his face increased. As expected, I'll refine the god-slaying dagger. This is the Qi Cauldron controlling technique. Wang Feng was speechless. It's that simple? However, Wang Feng couldn't use the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth to refine it. The Cauldron of Heaven and Earth had returned to its origin, so the god-slaying dagger would probably turn into a soul crystal. Wang Feng still didn't know how to use the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth. "Yes, Lord Popetiff. Take a look. However, this technique is extremely difficult and requires my sect's Qi Cauldron as your martial soul. You won't be able to learn it." Qi Lianshan gave the black cloth with the Qi Cauldron controlling technique engraved on it to Wang Feng. This technique had been lost for so long, so when he glanced at it, he felt like he was reading a heavenly book. Therefore, he wasn't afraid of others seeing it. Unlike the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique, the Qi Cauldron controlling technique had more requirement. The Qi Cauldron controlling technique is very strange when used. A soul master doesn't even need to move in the slightest to control the cauldron and refine the materials. It can be said to be extremely profound. Qi Lianshan said with a smile. Wang Feng took it and carefully examined it. The black cloth was densely packed with white words. They were probably some chants and techniques, but there was no explanation. However, after reading it, Wang Feng was stunned for a moment. "Lord Popetiff?" Qi Lianshan looked at the motionless Wang Feng. At that moment, A disciple of the Qi Cauldron sect walked over with a wooden tray. On top of the tray was a piece of iron that emitted the color of blood. Sect Master, the 1,000-year blood iron essence is here. Qi Lianshan took the 1,000-year blood iron essence. This was an extremely rare material in their mine. It was specially used to refine divine weapons. You can leave. Qi Lianshan hesitated for a moment. This 1,000-year blood iron essence was extremely difficult to refine. If he wanted to refine it into blood essence, he would need to use the 100 refinements cauldron for half a month to refine it into a fingernail-sized piece. It was impossible for outsiders to do it. But now, at that moment, the white-robed Popetiff, who was still in a daze, suddenly sucked the 1,000-year blood iron essence into the cauldron of heaven and earth. Then, Qi Lianshan saw a shocking scene. The cauldron of heaven and earth shook violently. Every time it shook, a layer of light bloomed around the cauldron of heaven and earth. Countless patterns slowly lit up. The sound of the vibration was as if someone was knocking on the cauldron. At the same time, the cauldron of heaven and earth suddenly floated in the air. Every time it shook, it would draw an arc. As the cauldron of heaven and earth shook, the sound of the cauldron resonated throughout the entire Qi Cauldron sect. However, the white-robed Popetiff did not move at all. He just stood there silently. However, the cauldron of heaven and earth seemed to be being violently hammered and refined. This is the true 108 refinements of Xian Qi Cauldron control. Qi Lianshan looked on in horror. How is this possible? The Xian Qi Cauldron control technique requires the Xian Qi Cauldron martial spirit to use it. Moreover, it is extremely difficult to comprehend. The requirements are very high. How can someone learn it in such a short time? This was too inconceivable. If it was someone outside the sect, they might not understand what this meant. However, as the sect master, he naturally knew what this meant. This is too amazing, Qi Lianshan muttered. End of chapter. Chapter 586. Sect Master Qi, is this your sect's Xian Qi Cauldron controlling technique? Thomas was surprised. It doesn't seem difficult. Lord Popetiff learned it after seeing it once. As expected, this Qi Lianshan was just bragging, right? Qi Lianshan's face flushed red. He said in a deep voice, Bishop Thomas, you're not a member of my sect. You don't know how difficult it is to learn the Xian Qi Cauldron controlling technique. Sigh, forget it. You people outside the sect won't understand. Thomas smiled. Hulaina and the other two didn't understand either. Just like how they didn't understand how difficult it was to learn the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique. They walked a different path. It's fine as long as it's powerful. Evil Moon muttered, it doesn't matter if we understand it or not. Yen nodded. Lord Popetiff was indeed powerful. His cauldron martial soul was so powerful that even Qi Lianshan felt inferior. Now, he had learned the Qi Cauldron controlling technique. They didn't know anything else, but if it was someone else, they definitely wouldn't have been able to do it. In the past few months, Lord Popetiff had displayed strength, courage, wisdom, and knowledge. They couldn't help but admire him. Soon, in less than a few minutes, a glittering blood iron essence appeared from the cauldron of heaven and earth. It was about half the size of a fist. It's a 1,000-year blood iron essence. Qi Lianshan's pupils contracted. He actually finished refining it in such a short amount of time. I'm afraid this isn't something that can be done with just the Xian Qi Cauldron controlling technique. It should be related to the cauldron of heaven and earth. The blood iron essence fell into Wang Feng's hand and he handed it to Qi Lianshan. Sect Master Qi, are you satisfied? Qi Lianshan's hands trembled as he received the blood iron essence. He was so excited that he couldn't speak. You really learned the Xian Qi Cauldron controlling technique? Qi Lianshan asked in a trembling voice. Wang Feng was silent. How could it be said? Wang Feng had indeed learned it after reading it. The Xian Qi Cauldron controlling technique wasn't complicated. However, the conditions were very harsh. The reason why many people couldn't learn it was simple. The Xian Qi cauldron controlling technique required mental strength. Moreover, one's mental strength had to reach an unimaginable level to be able to use it. To put it simply, the water droplets that were condensed from his spiritual energy could only be used when his spiritual energy had reached a similar level. This was a hard and fast condition. It was just like how the sunflower manual required one to castrate oneself before one could learn it. The profound Qi cauldron controlling technique also required mental strength to reach this level before it could be used. Wang Feng guessed that the person who had created the profound Qi cauldron control technique was most likely an expert who was born with terrifying mental strength. He was also the founder of the Qi cauldron sect. However, he might have created this profound Qi cauldron controlling technique in his entire life, but he did not create a method to cultivate the mind. As a result, it was difficult for his descendants to cultivate the profound Qi cauldron controlling technique. Even if some of his descendants were talented in mental energy, they would not be able to reach the level of their ancestor. That was why the Qi cauldron sect had declined generation after generation. Because in this world, there was no way to cultivate mental energy. If Wang Feng hadn't obtained the Qian secret art and cultivated his soul and psyche, condensing his psyche into water droplets and forming his divine sense, he probably wouldn't have been able to learn it. This profound Qi cauldron controlling technique does have many powerful functions. Wang Fengxin thought to himself. By bombarding the cauldron with mental strength and shaking the soul power inside, each shake can greatly change the structure of the materials inside and remove impurities. If I cultivate this technique, the cauldron of heaven and earth will have many uses for me. It won't just be refining all the heavenly treasures into soul crystals. The cauldron of heaven and earth could refine all kinds of heavenly treasures into the purest energy source and soul crystals for soul masters to cultivate. However, it also eliminated the other effects of many heavenly treasures. There were pros and cons. If Wang Feng used the profound Qi cauldron controlling technique, he would be able to shake out the toxins and negative effects of many heavenly treasures and retain their original effects. He would be able to maximize the use of these heavenly treasures. At the same time, he would be able to freely refine all kinds of weapons and armor and improve their quality. The effects were naturally great. It could also increase the efficiency of the cauldron. Back when he was in the extreme north, there was a high chance of failure when he fused with the soul bone. Wang Feng was lucky back then and succeeded. He was lucky. Now that he had learned the profound Qi cauldron controlling technique, he could almost achieve a stable fusion. Moreover, the fusion of soul bones was not limited to the same type of soul bones. He should be able to fuse with other soul bones as well. It was likely that the Qi cauldron sect would not be able to fuse with soul bones. This was because their cauldron was not the cauldron of heaven and earth. It did not have such powerful abilities. Wang Feng even suspected that when he cultivated to a higher level, this cauldron of heaven and earth might even be able to fuse and refine living creatures. Refine monsters? Refine beasts. It can also repair all kinds of divine weapons, Wang Fengxin pondered. This was the ability recorded in the profound Qi cauldron controlling technique. However, in terms of function, the profound Qi cauldron controlling technique was indeed not inferior to the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique. Especially when combined with his cauldron of heaven and earth, it could be said that it had developed the ability of the cauldron of heaven and earth to a great extent. This was an unexpected gain that Wang Feng had not expected. Moreover, the profound Qi cauldron controlling technique was also a special defensive technique. Similar to the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique, the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique was also a powerful offensive technique. At this moment, Qi Lianshan suddenly knelt down in front of Wang Feng and said in an extremely solemn voice, "From today onwards, The Qi Cauldron sect will completely submit to the martial spirit hall. We will not be disloyal. Wang Feng did not say anything when he saw this. However, Thomas was overjoyed. Hu Laiina and the other two were also overjoyed. At this point, the Qi Cauldron sect had completely submitted. However, Qi Lianshan was more shrewd. He directly said that he would submit to the martial spirit hall, but he did not say that he would completely submit to Wang Feng. Given the abilities that Wang Feng had displayed, it was possible that the Qi Cauldron sect had truly submitted to him and not the martial spirit hall. After leaving the Qi Cauldron sect, Wang Feng continued to patrol the various large cities in the Star Luo Empire. About half a month later, Wang Feng arrived at the last of the four lower sects, the Battle Luo sect. This sect was the opposite of the Qi Cauldron sect. It was a beast martial soul sect that focused on fighting. Zhan Xiaotian came from this sect. However, he left the sect and joined Ares College later on. According to Thomas, the dean of Ares College and the sect leader of the Battle Luo sect had been a couple at the very beginning. Originally, they were both from the Battle Luo sect. However, due to differences in ideals, they separated. One of them founded the Battle Luo sect, while the other founded Ares College. They did not interact with each other. They even fought against each other and created all sorts of soul skills to counter each other. It was the same even now. After hearing this, Wang Feng thought to himself, aren't they Wang Chongyang and Lin Chaoying? However, although they seem to have a deep relationship, the Battle Luo sect's conditions are not troublesome at all. End of chapter. Chapter 587. The Battle Luo sect was the strongest among the four lower sections. They were also the only sect that had a titled Doulu. The sect leader of the Battle Luo sect, Zhan Aotian, was a rank 94 titled Dalu. His martial soul was the golden giant ape, an extremely powerful soul beast. The other disciples of the Battle Luo sect all had similar powerful beast souls. However, the Battle Luo sect's request was the simplest. All he had to do was to defeat the entire sect, one by one. Logically speaking, this wasn't difficult for Wang Feng. It wasn't difficult for Bibidon either. However, why didn't Bibidon force the Battle Luo sect to submit to him? Wang Feng was very curious about this. The other two sects had special requests that Bibidon couldn't fulfill. He could only force the two sects to submit to the martial spirit hall. However, the Battle Luo sect's request wasn't difficult. With Bibidon's abilities, it wasn't difficult for him to fulfill it. It was only after Wang Feng defeated the entire Battle Luo sect that he learned the reason from Zhan Aotian. Our sect's ancestral teachings. We'd rather die than submit to a woman. Wang Feng was speechless. The Battle Luo sect's ancestor was probably a straight man. He was really a pair of enemies with the person who founded the Ares Academy. However, it was also because of this that Bibidon couldn't make the Battle Luo sect submit to him. Until now, the four lower sects had completely submitted to the martial spirit hall, or rather, to Wang Feng. The original Elephant Armor sect had returned from the extreme north a month ago. They had successfully solved the problem of Huyen Li's martial soul. At this point, there was only half a month left until the 5-year agreement. Little San should have left Heaven Do City by now, right? Wang Fengxin thought to himself. He had to admit that this patrol was completed. Wang Feng had a clearer understanding of the powers on the continent. He also had a detailed understanding of the martial spirit palace's strength on the surface, so he had a rough idea. Other than that, Wang Feng had also gained a lot. For example, the 7-kill sword technique and sword chi of the old Jian master. He had also swallowed the grass of 7 emotions and 6 desires in the medicine spirit sect, which had almost awakened his 7th blood vein. The other 6 blood veins had been strengthened, and he had learned the Xian Qi Cauldron control technique in the Qi Cauldron sect. Furthermore, he had become Bibidon's confidant. He became the second leader of the martial spirit palace. Now, his name, White Pope Diff, had shaken the entire continent. Aside from the Supreme Sky Sect, Wang Feng had been to the 7 great sects and 2 great empires. The Clear Sky Sect seemed to have 2 titled Douluo, and one of them was a transcendent Dalu. Wang Feng felt somewhat regretful that he could not go to the Supreme Sky Sect. However, when he thought about this experience, he felt that it was sufficient. After all, Wang Feng had already learned the disorder-splitting wind hammer technique. Hence, to Wang Feng, there was not much meaning in going to the Supreme Sky Sect. However, if he went there, he might meet the mistress again. Moreover, Bibidon also sent a message asking Wang Feng to quickly return to the Pope's palace, saying that they had something important to discuss. Evidently, Bibidon wanted to discuss some of her plans with Wang Feng. With Wang Feng's perfect ending to this patrol, Bibidon would not have any more doubts. At this point, Wang Feng led the 4 of them back to the Pope's palace. Clear Sky Sect. Beside the cliff of a chained iron bridge, there were obvious traces of a battle on the chained bridge. Many of the iron chains had been broken. From time to time, gravel would fall from the surrounding cliff. On the other side of the iron bridge, a few elders and a middle-aged man with a rough face were watching with serious expressions. One of the elders looked a little displeased. His entire body was in tatters. Evidently, he had just been through a battle. After a brief moment, a figure walked up from the edge of the cliff below. This figure was Tang San. The 8-spider spear gently pierced into the stone wall of the cliff and quickly lifted Tang San, who was covered in wounds. When he reached the ground, he withdrew the 8-spider spear, which was already full of cracks. Seeing this figure, the elder with the displeased expression slowly relaxed. He snorted coldly and said, "If you agree to a bet, you must accept your loss. I agree to let you acknowledge your ancestors." Standing on the ground, Tang San, who was stumbling, revealed a pale smile. Half a year ago, the appearance of the white-clothed Pope Diff made Tang San even more motivated. He graduated from the Moon Pavilion a month earlier. In less than a year, he successfully graduated from his aunt's school and returned to his father's side. At the same time, he also learned about his mother's situation. His mother was a 100,000-year soul beast, the Blue-Silver Emperor. Back then, the Pope of the Martial Spirit Hall chased after his death. In the end, his mother appeared and gave the soul ring to his father. Because of this incident, his father was unable to recover from the setback. He was depressed and lived a dispirited life in the Holy Spirit Village. After learning about this, Tang San was even more furious. He was even more determined to make the Martial Spirit Hall his enemy. At the same time, Tang San also obtained the 100,000-year soul bone left behind by his mother, the Blue-Silver Emperor's right leg bone. He also obtained the 2 inherited soul bones that originally belonged to the Clear Sky Sect. He also followed his father's guidance and came to the Clear Sky Sect. He met his uncle, the Roaring Sky Douluo, and many elders. Among them, there was even a titled Douluo, the 7th elder. They didn't acknowledge his existence and even insulted him. Tang San challenged the 7th elder, the Blazing Sun Douluo. However, the Blazing Sun Douluo only used half of his strength. In the end, Tang San relied on his extraordinary strength, 2 domains, the 8 spider spears, and twin martial souls to defeat the Blazing Sun Douluo, who almost broke the rules. "I'm still too weak. The 2nd elder, the Blazing Sun Douluo, is only rank 92. If the white-clothed Pope Diff appeared, I'm afraid I would be defeated in a few moves, let alone Bibidon." Tang San sighed in his heart. It was so difficult to defeat a rank 92 titled Douluo who only used half of his strength. It was almost impossible for him to go against the Martial Spirit Hall. However, to the people of the Clear Sky Sect, Tang San's performance was enough to shock them. "Seniors, can I ask my father to return to the Clear Sky Sect now?" Tang San looked at the elders of the Clear Sky sect and asked. When Tang Hao married his mother, the sect leader of the Clear Sky sect, who was also Tang Hao's grandfather, did not object. Unfortunately, they provoked the Martial Spirit Palace, which led to the Martial Spirit Palace attacking the Supreme Sky sect, bringing disaster upon themselves. Tang Hao was expelled from the Clear Sky sect. After that, Tang Hao, who had high hopes, never returned to the Clear Sky sect. He was directly expelled. No. The second elder shook his head and said. Second uncle, Tang Xiaotian frowned. Lil 3 has already proven his strength and potential. The Clear Sky sect needs a leader now. You know my temper and character. It's very difficult for me to lead the Clear Sky sect out of its current predicament, let alone go against the Martial Spirit Hall. Recently, the white-clothed Popetiff's name has spread across the continent. He's very powerful, even more powerful than second brother. If this continues... The second elder waved his hand and said in a deep voice, I know that. Tang Hao can't do it anymore. This child is outstanding, but it's not enough. I know what you mean. You want Lil 3 to inherit the Clear Sky sect. But I don't believe it yet. The second elder sighed softly when he said that. After the previous sect leader of the Clear Sky sect passed away, he was the most senior person in the Clear Sky sect. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.